Aloha, everyone. Thank you for being here this morning. We're going to do a call to order. So today is Friday, March 7th, 2025. The time is 9:01 a.m. and the Endangered Species Recovery Committee public meeting is called to order. My name is Jason Omick, Wildlife Program Manager with the Department of Land and Natural Resources, Division of Forestry and Wildlife. I'll be today's ESRC public meeting chair. Before we get started, just a couple items for everyone. Please do not use the Zoom chat for comments during the meeting. We can address folks as needed. Zoom chat's not visible on for everyone to see, so we just want to make sure that we put that shout out. If you'd like to provide written comments, please email them to DOFAW.HCP@Hawaiʻi.gov. That's DOFAW.HCP@Hawaiʻi.gov. We are live streaming on YouTube. All draft meeting minutes and materials are viewable online on our ESRC website. And that is on donr.hawaiʻi.gov/wildlife/ESRC/meeting-archives. We are in the conference room. I have the DOFAW HCP staff here with us, and they're going to go ahead and just introduce themselves.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Aloha Friday. My name is Kelly Yamaguchi, DOFAW HCP staff.
Aloha kako, Jesse Adams, HCP staff.
Aloha, everyone. My name is Kinsley McEachern, I'm DOFAW HCP Program Associate. And I also forgot to do this yesterday, but I just wanted to say that we will have Danica Swenson, our Deputy AG, in attendance today. She was in attendance yesterday as well, and so she's available if we need to go, if the ESRC needs to go into executive session. And I just wanted to also extend a lot of gratitude to Danica because she has been helping on all of these projects. She has been our go-to AG, and the AG's office is very busy, and she goes above and beyond to help support these projects. So she was a major person that we wanted to extend gratitude and mahalos, and I forgot to do that yesterday. So we're really grateful to Danica for her efforts in helping our HCP team.
Great, thank you, Kinsley. Community members, please introduce yourself at this time and state if anyone's in the room with you. Please remember to leave your cameras on during the ESRC discussion.
Good morning, I'm Melissa Price with UH. There's no one in the room with me.
Aloha mai kako, Kabiko Winter. I have a family member in the house, but I have earbuds on and nothing is audible.
Aloha, I'm Lisa Spain. I'm a ESRC member at large and nobody is in the room with me.
Good morning, Lindsay Young, also a member at large, and no one is in the room with me.
So Karen is not with us today. Great, thank you, everyone. So we have 5 items on today's agenda.
Wait, sorry, just to check, Fish and Wildlife is again not here today at all?
That is
right?
correct.
It's a bummer. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, we have 5 items today on the agenda. For items 2 through 5, staff will provide DOFA updates on each HCP or safe harbor. Following staff presentations, a representative from each project will present on their compliance for fiscal year 2024. Representatives, please keep your presentations to 20 minutes. Following each presentation, we'll open the floor for public and ESRC discussion and comments. Item 6 today will be adjournment for the meeting. With that said, we can move forward to item 2. DOFA staff will present on the status of Kenai Industrial Park, the round leaf chaff flower, and we'll just move forward with HCP presentations at this time.
Good morning, everyone. Pulling up the presentation now. So as a reminder today, we'll be going through the non-wind farm HCPs and safe harbor agreements. The first item for today is a review of the Kenai Industrial Park project. The ITL license holder for this is AKC Leasing Corporation. The project was development of 3/4 of an acre. The ITL duration was February 10th, 2014 to February 9th, 2024. The original mitigation that was outlined, there were 2 plants that were threatened at this site. Those plants were removed by appropriately credentialed DOFA staff. 23,000 seed were collected. 400 of these were propagated by Hōkū Ma'aleola. The remaining seed was sent to the Hawaii Rare Plant Program Seed Lab. This is Lion Arboretum Seed Bank. And of the 400 propagules that were given to Hōkū, this resulted in 159 outplants. The original outplanting site for this project was Kīlauea unit of the National Fish and Wildlife Refuge. Activities here occurred between 2014 and 2021. This site was fraught with numerous issues. There was poor survivorship. There was no survival of recruited individuals through the dry season. There were site maintenance issues, particularly with irrigation. The licensee had a lack of annual reports. And first and foremost, there was poor tracking of the founders that were present at this site. There is, within this HCP, there are contingency situations that the licensee could have entered into. This resulted in them moving sites to Kīlauea Heritage Park in 2022. They outplanted 103 individuals. These were from clonal material from the original 2 parent plants. The plants out there have been successful. On 4/19/2024, the issues with this HCP were brought before the ESRC committee. There was robust discussion, a presentation from the licensee, and it was determined that a decision by the ESRC needed to be deferred to a later date. After this meeting, DOFA met with the AG, and a decision was reached that the licensee would submit these annual reports and the contingency plan. The licensee did complete this, and on June 6, 2024, DOFA issued a letter stating that the obligations were met under the HCP and ITL. Some lessons learned from this process is that plant HCPs are very different from their animal counterparts. ESRC suggested in the 4/19 meeting that perhaps there needed to be a separate meeting with biologists, HCP section staff, and committee members to discuss these differences to be prepared for future plant HCPs. Hawaii is unique in the sense that we are one of the few, if not the only state that can have an HCP for plants. As a botanist, I would advocate for having this meeting so that we could discuss about how we will handle future plant HCPs. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. I have some questions.
Yes.
So, and great synopsis. Thank you so much. And I think just to remind everybody, I think this is the first HCP that was ever done, if memory serves. And so there are definitely a lot of lessons learned. So thank you for highlighting that. You mentioned somewhere in this list about 2 individuals outplanted. I think that's Kīlauea Heritage Park. They were clonally produced from original 2, but which original 2?
There were only 2 individuals present at the site, and the site being the AKC leased parcel. There were only 2 individuals present there. So they took clonal material from those 2 individuals that were present. What
was the lineage of those 2? We don't know.
Those were existing wild plants.
Oh, okay. And what became of the remaining 2,200 and 600 seeds? Is that still at Lion?
Some of those are still at Lion. Some of them were used for other outplanting.
Okay, so those lineages are still out there, right? And we know where they are and things like that?
Yes.
That's great. Thank you for that, clarifying that. And I'm supportive of participating in a meeting if that's at all helpful as a botanist myself.
Thank you, Kavika.
Sorry, can I assume there's no presentation from the permittee today since it's essentially closed out? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is essentially just reporting out on what happened a year ago.
Yes.
Okay.
Melissa, we're adding Kavika's recommendation right now to a slide, but we can pull that up, but we can add them as general recommendations for our team.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Is this the first HCP that was ever completed as well? Or have we completed HCPs before?
There was an albutilon HCP for HDOT.
Is that one closed?
That one is a little bit.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
That one, but there have been, I believe it was on, let's see, we do have closed ones. We have, I'm gonna pull it up now. And then Jesse's gonna share the screen with the recommendation. We have the for Lanai Met Towers. That's concluded. That was approved in 2008 and concluded in 2015. And the solar telescope on Haleakalā HCP was approved in 2011 and concluded in 2019. And then this is the third one that was approved in 2013 and concluded in 2024.
Okay, well, congratulations to everybody for seeing the third one full circle. That was a lot of work.
And sorry, just a point of clarification, and I'm sure you presented it and I just missed it. Those two original plants, are they still there?
No, Mac here removed those plants from the site.
Right. Okay. Okay. So there's, okay. Got it. Okay. Thanks.
I was gonna say a lot of work on DOFAW Oahu's side and the botanists. So definitely extend that to them as well as the ESRC for your input. Appreciate y'all.
Yeah, and much appreciation to the people who manage the seed banks and plant propagation. All of that is so incredibly important.
And so this is the only recommendation. This is for the general recommendation. Is that correct? Okay.
Maybe, is this a time to make a note of, there's some weird stuff in 195D about genetics that, is it, Kavika, remind me, is it applies to plants and not to everything else? Or it applies to everything else but not plants?
That's my recollection. Maybe Danica could clarify.
Okay, so yeah, maybe just as long as we're saying, hey, we're gonna talk about similarities and differences between plant and animal HCPs and how we handle those. While we have someone who's so familiar with rulemaking, Jason, in this position, it might be useful for us to just take a look at that and consider the policy while we're considering the application at the same time.
Yeah, the Chapter 91 process is a love-hate relationship.
So I think there's a lot of lessons learned that aren't quite captured in this list of recommendations. I'm trying to remember what some of the major issues were. I think it was the success criteria were a bit nebulous, and or if plan A failed, there wasn't a good plan B and C. Does that sound right from staff's perspective?
Yes, there were issues with the survivorship criteria. I believe in the 419 meeting, Susan Jing, a Oahu botanist, noted that there were issues with groundwater in that EVA area. And the criteria for the first and I believe through the 5th years was 100% survival and then decreasing to about, I want to say 75% survival. So at one point, the DOFA and the ESRC in agreement removed those conditions for survivorship because it was deemed that it was just too difficult to meet those at the site due to the groundwater conditions and the harshness of the environment.
Right. Yeah, so all that needs to be taken into account, obviously, but it'd be good to have that. And I don't know, I don't remember that seed banking was actually a part of the success criteria, but that's something that could happen for plants, obviously not animals. It's, I think, important to work in there.
There is cryopreservation as an equivalent for animals, but it's a considerably more expensive process. But there is an equivalent.
Another issue that I'd like to bring up is, in addition to the seeds that were collected from the 2 original founder plants at the site, additional seed was collected from other city and county locations. And when these seeds were given to the vendor for propagation, apparently the seed lots were mixed. So just having more stringent regulations or an understanding perhaps with the applicants that these lineages do need to be tracked. We cannot mix seed lots because that was a large issue that was highlighted.
And as I recall, this same species is a wildly successful plant for sale at Home Depot. So that was kind of another element in this story that there was unclear genetics with those plants being sold. So I think those are, you know, other complications with certainly a lot of the dry forest species do really well in landscape.
I'll maybe just note that there are much larger conversations. I mean, I think we're making a list of things to discuss at a future date, right? But there are much larger conversations with plant genetics that are really big. I mean, if you start with 2 individuals and you're like, no, you can never mix them with anything. Well, you're just setting yourself up for inbreeding problems, right? So, yeah, these are complicated conversations. So just want to note that it's not like everyone knows what to do. We just need to have a hard rule that we apply all the time. Like these are really big conversations. So.
Another recommendation, I think, when we pull this meeting together, I would recommend including Jim Jacoby because he is former ESRC member who is a part of that first HCP process, and I think he might have some institutional memory about where things went sideways.
And to be good, Danica is here now. If I don't know if you want to ask her specifically your question or.
Sure. Good morning, Danica, and thank you for all your support of ESRC. Yeah, so there's a question regarding, there's a genetic diversity component of 195D, and our recollection was mixed about whether it applies to everything but plants, or could you please clarify?
Yes, I'll look into that real quick. I'm not familiar with the provision you just talked about relating to biodiversity, so I'll find it. But in terms of the HCPs and net gain and recovery, those statutes don't talk about genetic diversity, but I will take a look, and when I'm ready, I'll raise my little hand in here.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Oh, but you guys can and should continue the meeting while I look that up. This is Danica still. Thanks.
I have no further recommendations.
Everyone else, okay with this? If we can, if we think we got everything we need here, and then we'll follow back here once Danica follows up with us. We'll just give a hand raise for everyone approving what we have here, and we'll move on.
We're gonna use this for the whole day.
I approve, and I do have that pulled up, the provision. It's that it applies. It says the take is not likely to cause the loss of genetic representation of an affected population of any endangered, threatened, proposed, or candidate plant species. So essentially, it only mentions plants specifically in considering genetics, which is kind of interesting.
He is interesting. Melissa, which statute is that?
195D number 9,
9.
G9. Yeah, 195D-4 G9.
Oh, dash
Give-
4.
Yes.
Given that that was just read out loud, would it be possible for Melissa to put that, okay for Melissa to put that in the chat so I could just read it? Any objections, staff?
I think we just defer to Danica on that.
Danica, it was just read out loud. Can we put the words in the chat so I could read it?
Sure. We're not supposed to really use the chat, but but you know what I can do that's not sharing the chat is I can share my screen because now I have it up as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How about I put it in the chat and then it can be put onto that thing we were just looking at, because then
Oh,
it becomes
perfect.
part of the record. Okay, but sorry, I interrupted a essentially motion to move forward.
I will not second because I want to read this real fast.
So like, for example, in this case, because the plants are still something we could be discussing in that future meeting is, does loss of genetic representation mean that you don't have a seed bank and you don't have plant propagules somewhere? Because if you do have a seed bank and you do have plant propagules somewhere, you haven't technically lost the genetic representation, but you have in the wild. So I think that's the kind of stuff that it would be good for us to have a conversation about at a future date.
Agreed. And with that, I'll second the motion to move forward.
Great, thank you guys.
So, raise your hands.
Yeah, they voted already. We got a second, so we're gonna move forward. I need to see if there's any public comments. So I'm at this time, we're gonna see if there's any public comments on Zoom and or our HCP email.
None on the email.
None on email,
Any on YouTube?
YouTube or Zoom.
No. Sorry,
And if anyone wants to testify on Zoom as well.
none on Zoom.
Or YouTube.
And then YouTube, sorry.
Not on YouTube. Nothing on YouTube and no testimony on Zoom. So
Okay, I have one more thing to add before. So just for Danica, as she prepares her response, could you just check the legislative history as a part of preparing that response, please? Thank you.
and just all right, great. Thank you guys. We'll move on to item 3 and we'll come back to the recommendations later if we need to. I think we have the statute on there, so I think we're okay there. Okay, so moving on to item 3. Item 3 is the status of Hōkūala, former Kauaʻi Lagoons, Hawaii Habitat Conservation Plan on Kauaʻi. Let's see here. We're going to go ahead with DOFAW presentations first on this also, so we can move forward with that.
Okay, so this is for Hōkūala, formerly Kauaʻi Lagoons, their habitat conservation plan. The ITL licensee is Hōkūala Community Association. The project is an oceanfront resort, approximately 600 acres. Their ITL duration is 2012 to 2042, so a duration of 30 years. We're currently in year 12, 40% through their permit term. So here is directly from their fiscal year 2024, their annual report. They had the direct incidental take of 7 birds, excuse me, 2 Nēnē, 2 alai keʻokeʻo, 1 alai ula, and 2 a'o. Except for the 2 a'o, which were attributed to fallout, all take were fatalities. So most of the take at this property occurs from either golf-related or vehicle-related issues. So these were all vehicle collisions or golf ball strikes. Here is their cumulative take data from 2012 through 2024 fiscal year. We did not include any fiscal year 2025 data in this table. So this is currently their take calculations, direct and indirect take. And then on the right side, you can see a table showing their permitted take levels. So a couple of things to note for this project. There have been take of 32 alai ula and permitted take is 40. And take of 9 Nēnē and permitted take is 17. So not, I guess, past the halfway mark for Nēnē take, and we're only 40% through the permit term. Okay, there we go, thanks. These are the DOFA staff concerns and recommendations. Before I hop into these, I just do want to make a note that Hōkūala does have a new contractor who carries out their HCP responsibilities. This is ICO's. Susan will be presenting shortly after, but they did make a lot of improvements from last year. There were issues with communication, down wildlife reports, and I think many of those have been resolved with the new contractor. So just wanted to point out some positives and improvements. They've also been working on additional avoidance and minimization measures through fiscal year 2024, and they've actually begun some in 2025, fiscal year 2025 as well. So I'm sure Susan will probably highlight those during her presentation, but I just do want to point those out. Moving on.
I have a clarifying question.
Sure.
So seems like based on that table, there are more concerns that are listed here. Could you go back to the table? Maybe I was misreading it. It's like Koloa. Indirect take is 1,200 and permitted take is 36. Why is that not concerning?
Oh, it's a 1.2.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Thank goodness.
I was wondering how that indirect calculation got so big. That was my second question. Okay. And alai ula was a listed concern or no?
Yes.
So that and Nēnē.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm on the same page. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. So the main concerns for Hōkūala is there are still discrepancies between what the agencies have and what the licensee has. The licensee is aware, and myself and U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Layla Nagatani, who's my partner for this project, We have been working to compile take, actually looking back since the inception of the HCP to make sure that all the data, actually that was my predecessor, Amanda Masias, to make sure all the data we had to go back to SOS data, reach out to the branches because we were missing some reports from the prior contractor with Hōkūala. So we're in the process of that. We have collectively decided to meet in spring 2025. So probably next month, April or May. So coming up very shortly after the annual review to kind of get everybody on the same page and rectify all those missing reports and take numbers. So there is some data discrepancies. That being said, that does kind of, in the prior table, their numbers are a little bit actually closer to their permitted take. So that's why number 2, I have lethal take of Haleakalā probably likely exceeds the permitted take at this point. So I think their calculation was 32 Haleakalā. I think with their corrected take plus indirect take, I think they're over 40. The lethal take of Nēnē as well. I believe Nēnē was a little bit higher than in their reported tables, so this brings them closer to the take of 17. So once we rectify all the discrepancies in data in that April or May meeting, we're gonna actually, we made the recommendation to Hōkūala to pursue a major amendment to increase their permitted take for Haleakalā and Nēnē. This was something that we had brought up to them before as they were approaching the take limits. But yeah, I think we're all waiting to just rectify the data and then we're gonna move forward with that major amendment. Oh, I also want to make a correction to yesterday. I apologize for the, I miscommunicated their mitigation. So for this project, I believe yesterday Melissa was inquiring about how they exactly monitor their hatchlings and fledglings. So I'm sure Susan will talk a little bit about that during her presentation. But I wanted to point out they actually mitigate with the maintenance and predator control of their 35 acre area of the property to provide nesting, foraging, habitat for the water bird species. So they actually don't mitigate with by production of fledglings. They mitigate by maintaining the habitat. For Nēnē and for seabirds, they mitigate through contribution of funds. So yeah, just wanted to make that clarifying point about yesterday's mitigation table. Okay, that's it for me.
Thanks, Kelly. If we can move forward with the presentation from Hōkūala, and then we can have comments and questions after that. So right now there is a representative here today, Susan Burr, with Hōkūala, and we'll leave the microphone to her at this point.
Okay, hi, good morning, everyone. So I am Susan. I'm with ECOS, and we are helping the Hōkūala HCP team comply with their HCP. So let me see if I can do this correctly.
And then I just made you a co-host, so hopefully you can share your screen through that.
Okay. I don't know why it has to, I can't get the correct screen. Okay, is this I can't get rid of it on the left side, but does this work good enough? Everyone can see the screen?
Sorry, are
Yes,
you not
see the
able to
screen.
do the click on from current slide? Is it just not?
I don't know that then it moves it to my other screen.
Okay, so you may be sharing screen 1 instead of screen 2 or vice versa. And so if you select for whichever one it currently isn't sharing right now, it's a screen 1 versus screen 2 issue.
Yeah. Let's see.
As long as there's not tiny writing, it's okay. Oh, perfect.
How's that work out?
Excellent.
I actually
Okay.
want to go for that with feature two lights.
Okay. So this presentation is going to report on Hōkūala's HCP efforts for fiscal year 2024, occurring from June 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2024. As Kelly stated, a bit of history about the permit. We're in our 13th year of implementation now. It was first approved in 2012 to Kauaʻi Lagoons. In 2016, it was transferred to Tower Kauaʻi Lagoons, which was subsequently named Hōkūala. The ICP and ICL is good for 30 years. So a quick summary of activities that happened last fiscal year and plans for the future is, okay, so first of all, the biologists are monitoring on a daily basis, and the number of Nēnē and other Hawaii water birds are increasing at Hōkūala since 2012. To address these increasing numbers of species, Hōkūala is implementing various adaptive management efforts to reduce the amount of take to the species. And as Kelly stated, we're approaching the limits for both the Nēnē and the Alaiʻula. So Hōkūala intends to seek a major amendment to the HCP for this upcoming year. So for fiscal year 2024, there were 27 Nēnē nests, produced 84 eggs, hatch rate of over 90%, and a total of 51 of the goslings fledged. The biologists on site monitor the water birds on a regular basis. The most common species that they're encountering is the Alaiʻula and also Nēnē. But as you can see from this last column, they're also counting the number of juveniles that are produced at Hōkūala. And both the numbers of adults that they're observing and the juveniles that are being produced are increasing. This is a photo of the 18th hole at Hōkūala, and as you can see, there are quite a few number of birds on the property every day. The biologists count between 200 and 500 of the covered species on property. Okay, this figure shows, let's see, the number of juveniles that the biologists count. And this goes back 6 years of the data that I have been able to see and confirm. So you can see there are a lot of gallinules each year, also quite a few of the Kīlauea ducks. fewer coots and really not very many of the stilts. Kelly shared this slide. This is the authorized take. And as Kelly had stated, I guess there are some discrepancies between the data that we have and the data that they have, but that's something that we plan to work on reconciling this year. USDA Wildlife Services operates hazing activities for the Nēnē at Hōkūala during most of the year. They haze basically all day and sort of is cyclical throughout the year. Okay, so, and then also as Kelly stated, the mitigation that Hōkūala contributes to, that's what these next couple of slides are going to show. So the first one is the trapping and predator control efforts. So this last year, they caught 26 cats, 4 pigs, over 1,000 chickens, and implemented a bullfrog trapping program. Caught the tadpoles and the frogs. Observed 1 dog on the property fiscal year 2024, and they observed 1 predation event by a rat on a Nēnē egg.
A quick question. Do you know what species of rat was predating that egg?
I do not know, but I could find out. I'm not sure that they know. They just saw I think the gnaw marks on the egg.
Okay, thank you.
So Hōkūala, the on-site biologist, provides a training course to every single person who works on-site: construction contractors, housekeepers, loss prevention officers, and everyone is retrained on a regular basis. Fiscal year 2024, 118 people were trained. Some construction occurred on site last year. The on-site biologists conducted surveys prior to the start of construction and inspected the construction sites every day. Let's see, 38 caution, like Nēnē crossing signs throughout the property, 5 speed bumps, and required 14-mile-per-hour speed limit. All the golf carts use the PACE technology, which alerts the driver of the golf cart, endangered species nearby, and prevents the cart from going into unauthorized areas, and reduces the speed limit of the cart when approaching sensitive areas. Also, the on-site biologists lead bird and nature tours. In fiscal year 2024, they gave tours to over 500 people. Major initiatives that Hōkūala undertook last year and are continuing on through this year is to reduce the number of vehicular strikes on the covered species. One of the main things was to move the employee parking lot from across the 18th hole, the slide that I had shown you where all the water birds were, and they moved it to the entrance gate. So now all the employees park outside and then ride a bus from that parking lot to the work area. This has reduced the amount of traffic by 75%. 5 cars each way each day, reducing the number of potential vehicular strikes each day. They have installed a new speed bump on Hōkūala Way and plan to replace some of the faded caution signs. Plans for next year include finalizing an MOU with SOS, participating in more frequent check-ins with the resource agencies, such as the on-site visit we have planned with Layla and Kelly for later this spring. Let's see, they want to participate in seabird searcher efficiency training by KESRP prior to the start of the fallout season. Renew the permit to remove western cattle egret from site when and where appropriate, and to request a major amendment to the HCP. So I think that is it. Yeah, so that's all I have. Any questions or comments?
Thank you. I certainly have a few questions and comments. So there was curiously no mention of cats, which has been a historic issue on this property. I believe this is a site when ESRC did a field trip a few years back. We witnessed an employee feeding a cat. And I believe that I brought this up at last year's annual report about things, and I think we were told that the biologist instructed them to not feed cats, but it seemed a little ambiguous. So could you tell us a little bit about what's going on with cats on property?
Yeah, they so there were over 1,000 trap nights set for cats, and 26 cats were caught.
Okay, sorry if I missed that.
Yeah, I went through it quickly. All the employees at Hōkūala go through this training where it's clearly communicated to them not to feed the cats, report cats. The biologists report that they always get calls from, people saying, hey, there's a cat hanging out at building number 7, and then the biologist will direct their trapping efforts to catch that specific cat. So whatever you guys did observe a couple years ago, maybe the culture has changed, or that was just like a one-off date.
Okay, thank you. Could you, I wanted to go back to the slide about fledging. I was curious about the drop between reported eggs and successful fledging.
Oh, sorry, Vika, before you move on to that
okay.
slide, can I just provide a follow-up comment on this particular, the cat issue? So I noticed that, essentially in practice, you're exceeding what the HCP describes. And I just want to note, if there's an amendment that's going to take place, this is directed at the HCP office, at the staff. This wording is something that I think is kind of based on goal rather than principle. So if the wording was changed to something like maintain a cat-free environment, or something, I realize that that's a difficult thing to do because of source sink dynamics and stuff like that. But essentially, if it sounds like in practice, what you're doing is trying to maintain a cat-free environment, right? And so essentially, if the HCP reflects your actual effort, one, I think that's more in keeping with what we're trying to do. And two, if the management biologists were to change at the site, it keeps it in keeping with the intent rather than this kind of thing here that, okay, so you deployed 10 traps. How do we know if that's working or not, right? So just a note for the HCP staff. And again, I want to commend you on the effort. I really appreciate that approach of really aiming for a cat-free environment. And Kavika, if you want to switch to your other question.
Okay, thank you.
Let me just add one thing about the cats. I think one thing that they struggle with is that there is the county access road through the site, and they can work with their employees, but then it's hard if someone else comes in and establishes a cat colony or whatever. It's not completely controlled by Hōkūala. So maintaining a cat-free environment is sort of outside of their control. But agreed, we can do, that's some wording that we should address.
What I hear you saying there is that you can't control necessarily whether people come in from the outside and feed cats, but you do have control over your trapping effort. And so what I see you doing, and I want to commend you for, is that when cats are seen, you immediately respond and remove them. And I think as long as that effort continues to take place, yes, I totally agree. You have no control over the fact that people may come in and feed cats. Now, people tend to be pretty predictable who are doing that. And so I realize that things can get contentious, but they're usually pretty predictable. They show up at 5 p.m., they put out the food. If your staff shows up at 6 p.m. and removes the food, like there are things that theoretically could be done, but if you're at least responding by continuously doing trapping and removal, then I think you're doing what's within your control to try to maintain a cat-free environment.
Or even on continuous trapping and removal in the areas surrounding where the cat feeding is happening on the off property. That's certainly something that should be done. Well, that'll probably end up in the recommendations later, but we okay to move on, Melissa? So if we could go back to the nesting success rate slide, please. That one went through a bit quicker than I was able to follow. That's really hard. So 84 eggs laid, 76 hatched, and 51 ledged, 67.1 nesting success rate. So Melissa, this is your area of study. How does that look to you?
My familiarity is on Oahu where there's mongoose. And so what we see is like an 80% drop in chick survival within the first week, or 80% drop in chicks, the number of chicks within the first week. And a lot of that is attributable to mongoose. So I would, I'm less familiar with Kauaʻi because you don't have the mongoose impacts. If you're doing a really great job of controlling cats at the site, which it sounds like your efforts are there, at least more recently, then I would expect those numbers to be much higher than Oahu, just on principle. That I think would make logical sense. So
these are comparable to Kīlauea Point. Just
there we go. Thanks, Lindsay.
So for Kauaʻi, these look good.
Okay, thank you. That's exactly the expertise I was looking for. And was there a similar slide for Haleakalā or no?
There is not.
That was the other species of concern that we're trying to work our way through.
Yeah. So the other, the biologists haven't found a way that they can count the number of waterbird eggs and chicks on a daily basis, because that's most of these nests are sort of laid in hidden areas, and then when they do observe the birds or the families, it's hard to keep track of who's who. So
this is also Melissa's area of expertise. Do you have any comments, Melissa?
Yeah, I would agree that it can be quite disturbing to the birds to plow through the vegetation looking for Haleakalā nests. So I agree it can be difficult to count eggs, and that that level of disturbance wouldn't be recommended at a site where you're trying to where it's not a targeted study for a short period of time, and then you get out of there and you don't do that continuously into the future. Counting chicks is comparatively easier if you're familiar with their areas and that kind of a thing. The Haleakalā, compared to like stilts, for example, the Haleakalā do return to the nest at night for a little bit of time, a few days at least. But they are kind of out and about, and then they're staying in that area. So I think chick counting is a little bit easier. For the Haleakalā, egg counting is hard, is what I would say. And I don't know, Lindsay, if you want to follow up for that, because I know I don't remember your water bird expertise. Sorry, I always think of you as seabirds, but you've done a wide range of things.
Yeah, not as much on the water bird end, but it is similar in some aspects, and don't really have much to add on what you just pointed out there.
Okay, I'm just wondering if there's a recommendation to consider when we get to that phase about starting a chick counting. But we can have the discussion when we get to the recommendation slide.
I think it can be, chick counting is important because it can tell you if you've got a predator problem. So I do see that they're already making major efforts to implement the kinds of control that I would want to see from a chick protection perspective. So bullfrogs are a big one, right? So I really appreciate that they're starting to put the effort in on the bullfrog removal. And there was just a presentation that I heard a few months ago at the Wildlife Society meetings where they had a really effective they completely knocked down bullfrogs at a site by just doing shooting of adult bullfrogs and egg mass removal. And through a combination of those two things, they were able to get it down to an effective population size of 0 and maintain that for multiple years with bullfrogs. So similar to kind of the cattle egret removal efforts, that may be something that you would want to consider. I don't know, Kavika, if that, but yeah, to me, it's an indicator. When you count chicks, it's an indicator of like, do we have a problem? If we're seeing decreasing number of chicks every day, then I know I've got a predator problem.
To me, a slightly more useful indicator is actually the percent that you're producing out of the nest, because the number of chicks without any sort of context around it doesn't mean that much. If you have 113, out of 113 live, that's great. But if it's 113 out of 1,000, not so great. And so I think putting this in context of where your starting point was would be helpful. And I know that that can be problematic for multi-clutch species like this, but if we knew the number of nests, okay, so there it is. Yeah, so just getting the reproductive output numbers and how those might change over time is probably going to be a slightly more useful indicator.
Yeah, and again, Lindsay, I don't know if we can be a little bit more clear as a committee. I do think that searching for Haleakalā nests to be able to count eggs is really, it can be quite disturbing to the habitat. And so I would be a bit nervous about encouraging them to count eggs. But I think that soon after hatching, I mean, these guys are, it's so clear when they're brand new babies, right? Like, and you can usually see like, oh, there's 6 chicks. Oh, shoot. Next day, there's 5 chicks. Oh, next day, there's 3 chicks. And I think if there's that kind of daily monitoring, which it sounds like they're doing anyways, I feel like you'd be able to see that drop off. And even though you don't know the number of eggs, I think the trade-off in searching for through the vegetation and counting eggs would be a worse impact. I don't know if we can just be a little bit more clear with them on, are we asking them to disturb habitat and count eggs or not? And if not, then can we essentially put a request in that they are counting chicks from the time they see chicks appear? And is that good enough? So
there's some sort of metric of loss is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I agree.
Right, because I mean, they're clearly understand where the nests are. And you know, I've not my scientific background, but my resource management background is that was my metric for understanding if there's predators around, is if the chick numbers had a drastic drop. So seems like a reasonable recommendation.
I have 2 quick comments to add in that. The on-site biologist said that, you know, they were interested in finding a way to better quantify the number of chicks and survival. They just weren't sure how to do it. So that's, if you do have like a clear recommendation that they can implement, I mean, they're interested in that. And for the bullfrog trapping, I mean, they were trapping tadpoles and adults, and they were also shooting the adults. So they are actively working on those bullfrogs.
Yeah, and I will say, having looked across a lot of literature on bullfrogs and listened to a number of talks on efforts, what folks are saying is that tadpole trapping efforts can be pretty intensive and were less effective than egg mass removals. The egg masses float at the surface, apparently are quite visible. And so removing those was a relatively easy effort. And even if you miss a few eggs, it's not that big of a deal because there's things that are going to eat them. If you get the majority of the egg masses, and then shooting the adults, but just having a really intensive effort at maintaining, they specifically said shooting. Trapping was less effective. So it was the shooting that was quite effective. So yeah, and there's humane approaches that are quite quick and lethal and that kind of thing. So anyways, longer conversation, perhaps for a sidebar conversation for a different time, but a worthwhile effort given the impacts to chicks for sure.
I'd like to just say one thing, Susan. I think our district biologist over there would be happy to help you with wildlife control permits for the cattle egrets too. We do that across the state, and can get those permits out to you guys really quick to control those wildlife.
Okay, and so we have talked about that and do need to apply for that permit. Just the difficulty of actually implementing shooting the birds on an active golf course and resort is going to be tricky. But first step is to get that permit and then to figure out the best way to implement it.
When they're mowing the lawn, that's time.
Ah, that's a good idea.
Or knowing their roosting sites is also useful if they're roosting on property in the evenings.
Yeah, they have kind of the rookery approach, right? So you could, I know at Hōkūala, they've been successful in actually removing invasive trees that were providing, I don't remember if it was a rookery or roosting habitat, but by removing those trees, they were able to substantially reduce the cattle egrets on site. So sometimes you can do habitat management in combination with removal efforts. I think the final thing I would just note for the record of the note taking that the HCP staff are doing, that the Haleakalā are critically endangered species. So similar to, I realize that between days, I don't think people listen in, but I get much more concerned when you're exceeding take under the permit on a critically endangered species that only occurs on 2 islands. And so that's much more concerning to me than when something is, growing and you're just seeing a lot of take because, hey, the population is recovering. And so of course you expect to see more take as populations are thriving. But for Haleakalā in particular, this is a critically endangered species that only occurs on 2 islands and is in low numbers. And so while it might be abundant at this site, and that's why you're having a lot of impacts, consider the other thing that kind of was a red flag to me is, the mitigation is essentially taking place through activities that in part would already take place at the site, such as maintaining the habitat. You're going to maintain the golf course, of course, anyways. And so for Haleakalā in particular, as you're exceeding take, and as those conversations are taking place in the background and we're not a part of them, we just see output once a year or every 6 months or something, partially in part directed at the HCP staff. It would be really important to me to see in any permit amendment that you're considering implementing mitigation elsewhere for Haleakalā in particular. So making up for those losses that are in excess at the site. And if no one else has any other comments, I have just one other thing. As you're presenting, Susan, I was sitting here kind of struggling because being told that something is getting close to exceeding the permitted take, halfway through the permit period or whatever is really concerning, especially for when it includes critically endangered species. On the other hand, I am always trying to focus on the math, right? At the end of the day, what we're interested in is, does the plus exceed the minus? And so at this site, it's clearly providing some great habitat for Nēnē and Aliʻula and Hawaiian ducks. They really like the site and the coots, right? You've got that open water there that they love. And so on one hand, great, this is fantastic habitat and it's being maintained in a way that it wouldn't be without active care. And so that's all great. And the problems that come along with that is that you're going to attract these birds to the site. You can't avoid that because this is going to be attractive to them no matter what. As an aside, hazing is considered take under the Endangered Species Act, so I'm sure that's considered in the HCP, but hazing is considered take. It's in the definitions, right? So yeah, this is one of those complicated sites that I think it's really important for us to sit back and say, hey, this is actually providing great habitat. It's just you've got threats in the form of golf balls that are killing things. And so you have the really hard task of making sure that that plus exceeds the minus. So I just want to acknowledge that while the mortalities are really alarming, if your net plus is greater than your minus, then you're achieving the goal. And I want to stay kind of on that logical side of things, that the math has to work, but we also have to trust the counting and, all that kind of stuff in the reporting. It has to be accurate given the observed mortality. Sorry, go ahead, Kavika.
Yeah, well, this is kind of segueing into where I wanted to go in the recommendations. Is it okay to transition to that phase of it?
If I can make a comment really quick. We brought up hazing twice now, and I want y'all to understand that this is through the USDA, right? And in compliance with HDOT to keep the aviation safety. It's not like something that we wanted to put in place. This is something of us working with the USDA in order for them to keep birds away from the runways, which are adjacent to our property. Just wanted to clarify that because that's not something that we negotiated into our HCP when we first during the inception of the program.
Yeah, and I wanted to touch on that and just make sure that we kind of have a historical look at those Nēnē kind of nesting and fledgling numbers as that hazing got brought into play, because I do recall in the past as that got implemented, the success rate of the Nēnē on site kind of declined. So just having that information for us, I think would be helpful because that is another complex piece of having the federal agency there hazing for a different reason.
Yeah, agree. And there was also a comment made about maintaining habitat and maintaining how is kind of the same thing if we're maintaining the golf course, but that's not exactly accurate either, because maintaining the habitat and maintaining the golf course, they get onto the golf course because their habitat is next to it. It's not that we're trying to create something. Not what we're doing with the golf course is creating their habitat. Their habitat's in a million other places outside of where the golf course is. It's adjacent to it because we have a golf course running through our property. Moving the parking was a very big deal for us, and moving the parking from where it is and having 75 cars on average a day from our employees that are driving through the property from the entrance where there's not as high of a density of any of these endangered species is a very big impact. And now we're starting to see, it's right out my window, all of these birds that are starting to get over to that area. What's very difficult for us is we're trying to figure out a way to keep them off the 18th fairway, right? And having habitats created around it's been a help and a start, but we would be so open to any suggestions on either deterrence or attractants that we can use to keep them away from that 18th hole, because it's very, Like you said, golf balls are, even the best golfer, it's hard for them to aim away from a bird when there's a million of them on the fairway, and most golfers are not very good golfers. It's not just the carts that are hitting them, and the GPS and, us constantly monitoring where there's been a high density of birds so that we can regulate speeds on the golf carts has been a big help, but that doesn't help people, guide people's ball away. And that 18th fairway, I mean, that picture is like a beautiful day out there. That is not what it's like most of the time. There's twice or three times as many birds as you'll see in the picture that Susan put up on a regular basis. It's way more than what that picture is showing. We can get more pictures and send it over to you, but that's something that we've been like scratching our heads and, wondering how we can get some more assistance on what we can do to keep the birds away from that fairway in particular.
And that's exactly where I wanted to go with the recommendations. So when we get there, I'll get into that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and great job on being responsive with the parking lot changes and that kind of a thing. Like, it's really wonderful in these annual meetings to hear about the changes that have taken place in the last year that really remove hazards that were problematic in the past. So really commend you on those efforts.
We're gonna go to the.
We're unmuted.
Okay.
We on recommendations?
Yep, we're gonna pull up that slide. Oh, here it is.
Yeah, we got it on screen on our end. So just following the momentum of the last comment. I'm sorry, I don't think you introduced yourself. Is it Eric?
I'm sorry. Yeah, Eric Kuki. I'm the senior project manager here on the development side. So I oversee the development and construction on the property, whereas David Nagao, who's also on here, is the association director and more in charge of the ongoing operation.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think part of the struggle that Melissa was alluding to earlier is coming to terms with this population. Seems that it's both a source and a sink at the same time. And so I'm just wondering if when we're looking at the amendment, we could look at a translocation process that takes the chicks that this property is producing and putting them out into other protected areas. I'm thinking North Shore, somewhere in Hanalei, or even at the end of the road in Hā'ena State Park. There's a population there. And there's wetlands all over the place on Kauaʻi. So just open discussion for ESRC and HCP staff about that idea. So this project could get credit for the birds it's producing and not have to deal with all the take of maintaining them or keeping them on the property.
Lindsay, I'm wondering if you can speak to that a little bit. You have some experience with translocations away from a site with hazards and to places of protection. I think what I might be concerned about in this case is I'm not convinced that if you're moving them away from a place that has predator control and has habitat maintenance, and you're taking them to a place that doesn't have predator control.
That's what I said. Take them to a managed place.
Yeah.
Not just throw them out in a stream somewhere.
Right. But is there a managed place that isn't already in excess of carrying capacity? I think that's the challenge. And now I know that there is a consideration. There's a working group working on looking at taking them to another island, right, Lindsay? So I don't know if you're still involved in those conversations. I know Eric's been there, so Pacific Rim is represented.
Well, and just related to that concern, I think take him to a managed spot. I mean, a spot that's managed but doesn't have predator control. Maybe part of the mitigation could be translocate the chicks there and fund some predator control to the existing management program. So also, I think should be on the table for thinking about solutions.
Yeah, so I mean, there is potential to do translocations. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it within the same island, just because, as Melissa pointed out, things are somewhat maxed out on Kauaʻi, as well as the really good options are the federal ones. And I know there's issues with translocating within that as part of an HCP process. So we can't really visit that right now. Between islands, yes, it is possible, but we might run into some of the same issues. You know, a lot of the translocations that are being planned for James Campbell, for instance, might be put on hold because the large refuge-wide fence that is going in, it's unclear what's going on with federal funding with that. So the same issues exist within island as they do between islands at this point. But in terms of reducing the chance of the birds actually returning to unsafe sites, between islands would be more desirable in that sense. So yeah, anywhere you translocate to, you're going to want to make sure that it's actually, or that it's managed for those species, and that usually ends up meaning a state or federal property.
Yeah, so in that regard, I think state parks are a good option. There's lots of, or several state parks on Oahu where there are wetlands, and maybe this would be some, I know those folks do predator control in some places.
Again, I think yeah, maybe what we should do is, for the sake of today, just mention that translocation could offer an option, but that there needs to be a lot more conversation in the background. At the moment, federal sites, I mean, they just fired a ton of the refuge staff. So we can't even, you know, when we have ongoing studies and we're looking to collaborate with folks, we're getting told no, because they just have zero capacity right now for any additional things because they've been so devastated, both in funding and in personnel. So at the moment, federal sites are not realistic to consider because they're having a difficult time maintaining their operations.
Aloha, guys. This is David Nagao. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I'd like to share a little bit about that, and I'm thankful for you guys conversations here and the look on the our HCP and our valiant efforts that our staff do out here. It's not only our biological staff, but our entire staff. It's the culture of what we build amongst every department within the company. I'm introducing myself. My name is David Nagao. I'm the Association Director for Hōkūala Community Association, but I've been on property for 34 years and have worked side by side with DLNR and as well as Alan Silva, who has been part of the program for prior to the inception of the HCP. He is a retired DLNR employee and has been part of the program with DLNR way back, and probably have incorporated a lot of the things that's been done on the island and where the population has blossomed. The photo that's on the we're hoping to get more improved photography to help display on these PowerPoints the impact of how much the population is out here. You literally could trip over birds is how much birds are out there. But it's a good thing, and again, it's also a bad thing because now we have in lieu of our HCP. And thank you for bringing up that point about it goes against our permit to haze the birds away from, technically we can't say haze. We are guiding them to safety if we have to escort them off a road or keep them safe. So that definitely would be a good point to possibly remove from the permit or allow us so that we're able to safeguard them in a better fashion without it being a violation of the permit. The Haleakalā being critically endangered is hard to believe when you're on site here because you do see them a lot. And it's sad that if we translocate them, that other areas or habitats on Kauaʻi is not able to take on more of the Haleakalā because we have a lot of them that we could, if translocate, possibly put them in a safer situation rather than being next to a roadway. But is it a possibility to translocate them within sight to more accommodating areas that we have had great population in, but especially those that may have nested along closer proximities of roadways, that they're translocated on site to a more remote area. And then I will be applying for the cattle egret take permit because we do have a lot of them on property. But again, we're more than a golf course. We are a golf resort, and there is a lot of public and guests around the property. So it's very difficult to have an area that we have a safeguard for shooting them. But there's possibilities in other ways that we'll look into, and definitely we'll lean on all of your guys' expertise on that. If there's anyone you guys could point in our direction to help us with that, that would be awesome. But just my 2 cents, and just wanted to share who we are on property here, and what culture that we bring to our resort, and the protection of the endangered species as well.
Thank you, David. Certainly don't look old enough to have been there for 34 years, so congratulations.
Thank you.
But
my white hair is fading.
Yeah, just a quick question. So what was your title again?
My title is Association Director for Hōkūala Community Association. Okay,
so does that mean you're kind of representing or are to represent the owners of what are those, condos or timeshares? How's that situated?
The entire resort development.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, with basically as your HOA.
Right. So there's multiple owners, not just a single. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes.
So relating to the cats, do you folks does the association have a policy about no pet cats, or pet cats allowed?
There is no pets. As far as the resort, each hotel parcel, there is no cats permitted on the property. As far as pets are controlled animals that is required either a leash or more of that has to be possibly entertained with home ownership on property.
Okay, yeah, because if I'm remembering correctly, it was more of a pet cat situation that the ESRC witnessed, and not a feral cat.
Do you know what year this was? Sorry.
Pre-pandemic.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was kind of the first that I've heard of, and we definitely will address it. It is a possibility. It was neighboring property because the cottages along the Molokaʻi hillside above Nawiliwili Bay is privately owned. They're our neighbor, not necessarily part of our within our resort property. But we do, anytime that we do see their cats out, we inform them about the hazard with violation of our permit, and that if they do come onto our neighboring property, we will have to take action against trapping their cat or possibly taking care of it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Kapika. Aloha.
David, thank you so much for sharing with us today and for being here. Just focusing on the recommendations here. One thing I don't see captured that was mentioned, and David had asked about the difficulty in shooting the cattle egrets. I want to make sure that we capture the option of checking where they're roosting and nesting. And if there's roosting and nesting sites, that's habitat management that could be done that could reduce the number at the site. It's not going to stop them from coming in and feeding during the day or being attracted to the site. But if you make it a little bit more difficult, by removing the habitat further away, then that's an additional tool in your tool belt that can be used to minimize cattle egrets at the site. So just staff just wanted to make sure that that was captured on the recommendations here.
Showing up on the screen.
I think it just needs to refresh. Thank you, Melissa, for adding that along with some of your earlier recommendations as well. And some of them fell into Hōkūala, and then some of yours, Melissa, we put on the general recommendation as well.
Quick question for HCP staff. Is translocation to Maui an option? Or is that like a whole can of worms?
I would say it could be an option. That's something that we can talk to our waterbird specialists about. And I think we can get an answer back on that.
Yeah, because part of the problem, one of the reasons why they're so critically endangered, because they're only on 2 islands, and we have amazing wetlands all over the Pai'aina. So maybe Hōkūala could help actually contribute to a larger recovery of the species in that regard, which would be awesome, and they could get commended for their work.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah, there's a whole working group that's been considering this and meeting for, I want to say at least 2 years now, looking at potential for reestablishing populations on islands where they historically occurred. So yeah, there should be a whole bucket load of information, Jason, that you folks can tap into on that potential. One other thing David had mentioned was that they might be in violation of their permit because of the hazing. And it was, I think, made clear a little bit ago that that's a DOT activity. And so it's not like the association is in violation of their permit by DOT doing that hazing. That's to protect aircraft. So you're not in violation of your permit by them doing those activities. But it just hazing is defined as take. So any activities that would be done to shoo them away or something are technically defined as take, because hazing is included as a form of take. But it can be a permitted activity, right? As long as it's written into the permit that these are taking place to minimize deaths and that kind of a thing, then it can be accounted for in the permit. So I realize there's a lot of nuance there, but just wanted to clarify to the degree that I could, although people with much deeper expertise than mine could have a longer conversation with you at a different time to make sure that all those nuances are fully spelled out.
Yeah, and as although most the hazing there with USDA is all Nēnē hazing, and those dogs are super trained not to mess with any of the other waterbirds. But I do have a lot of really great reports from Washburn and folks that's been doing that work for quite some time. And so maybe something that you guys can look at to where you can see, all the hazing activities and the outcomes of those and where these birds are kind of moving around to. It's kind of interesting data to take a look at.
I don't think I saw the bullfrog stuff. Am I just missing it?
Nope, apologies, Melissa, I can add that in for you. Would you be able to restate that with the bullfrogs?
Sure. It sounds like sorry, let me say something first. So it sounds like I want to acknowledge they're already starting bullfrog removal efforts. The recommendation would be to aim for a 0 bullfrog environment. So have removal efforts of both adults and egg masses that with the goal being to get down to a 0 detection of bullfrogs at the site. I think that would substantially increase their chick output, their chick fledging success.
And we also talked about aspiring for a 0 cat population, which cat free. I see it in here. I'm sorry.
Does that look okay, Melissa?
Yeah, and just for the sake of the contractor, I'll mention that that bullfrog effort, like the shooting bullfrogs is typically done at night, so it wouldn't interfere with your daytime golfer operations. So yeah. In contrast to the cattle egrets, which it's difficult because those have to be done during the day, but they can be in combination with the mowing, as was mentioned.
Can I mention something about our bullfrog trapping? It has been very productive. So anytime there's sighting of bullfrogs, we normally get them, and most times before a big population bloom comes out. We rarely see a big population bloom out of them.
Excellent. Yeah, our research team that was using transmitters to track Haleakalā chicks on Oahu fully found chicks in the stomachs of bullfrogs. So they'll swallow chicks whole. So again, commend you for those efforts. Those do make a difference.
I have one more, if we're ready, staff.
Go ahead.
So for 2, we talked about chicks as well as nests, and there was openness on the side of the permittee to monitor. So just say nest/chicks, and then we can, or whatever, that'll be a good prompt for later. And then for number 7, I think maybe something about crosswalking our efforts here with the Waterbird Working Group, or whatever that's called, the one that Melissa was mentioning. So we're not working in a silo.
That's what I was going to add to, is making sure that all of this is done within the context of the statewide working groups.
And I have a comment for number 2. So the on-site biologist said that it's basically very difficult for them to monitor the waterbird nest. But they are open to suggestions of how to better monitor the chicks. So if possible, I feel you don't want to recommend to monitor the waterbird nests. Is that correct?
That's what Melissa was saying, is it would be more damaging than beneficial to do nest monitoring. So I think we're on the same page there.
I think counting nests is fine. I think counting eggs is where it can get it can have much more disturbance going on.
Also, I agree with that, and I believe what Susan is trying to say is because of the population that we have on site, it's difficult to we will work with all of you to figure out methods in being able to better track it, a formula that we could use that would better track or be able to identify the birds better. The Nēnē has been primarily the only ones that was originally monitored more prominently because of their tags, but the Haleakalā doesn't have tags. So, and they're very, you really can't tell the difference between, unless they have chicks and you know how much chicks they have and all of those things. So we're hoping to find a method that works, that everybody can agree on.
Thank you. Staff, if you can add to where it says okay to count nests, can you say okay to count nests and chicks? But yeah, thankfully the adults are pretty territorial. So if you have an idea of where the nests are based on adult behavior, and they do give you clues to the fact that they're nesting, even if you can't spot the nest itself because it's buried in the reeds or something. So you can count the nests, and once you know that you've got a pair there and you know approximately when they started nesting, because you're keeping a good eye on things, usually you kind of know about when you're gonna see chicks, and then you see the chicks. If you're counting the chicks from that point, they're staying pretty close to where the nest is, and so you're able to associate nests and adults and chicks. Even if you can't tell the adults apart, based on kind of territories, you can kind of keep track of how things are going.
Yeah, from time to time we have nests really close to each other and they kind of cross paths, but I'm sure we'll figure out that method and be agreeable that those are the counts.
Okay, I don't think I have anything more to add. Thank you to staff for capturing this.
Sure.
And thank you for the permittee. This is a 180 from last year. So thank you so much for showing up and meaningfully engaging.
Yeah, so are we look like we're okay with the recommendations here, everyone? And if we are, we can, okay, we put your hands up for, okay, I got 3 families, okay. Great, guys. I just wanted to say one thing, you know, counting birds on a golf course, I go to Turtle Bay all the time and twice a year and count the birds there. And yeah, you can easily see where they're pairing up and nesting. Yes, you can't see the nests in the bulrush or the reeds back in there, but once, you know, I would come close to that area, those chicks are running straight back in there with their parents. Now looking at the picture where there's 100 birds on the green, it's like they don't even care about people. So I can see that might be a little bit more difficult to try to follow them back, you know, if they're not running back in there. But anyways, yeah, the techniques that you described there seem like they would work in most places, to be able to start counting those chicks as they come back out. But anyways, I just wanted to share that. So we're gonna, once we're done here, so we're approving these recommendations or okaying these recommendations at the moment. And we're gonna just see if we have any public comments on the discussion here for Hōkūala. And we're gonna
Public comments on Zoom.
nothing on Zoom.
None in YouTube. I mean, excuse me, none in the email.
None in email and none on YouTube. Okay, so we'll move forward. There was before we move on to the next item, we just wanted to go back once. We had some information that we wanted to share with you guys on the status of the seeds in the seed bank, going back to the Kenai industrial park discussion, and Jesse had something to share here real quick for you guys.
Thank you, Jason. I wanted to provide a more robust answer to Kavika's question. I checked in with Nathaniel Kingsley at the Seed Lab. He said that those seeds are still in their holdings and that they're using some of them for germination trials. I also confirmed with Susan Ching that the outplants are both at Kīlauea, and then they also have an outplant site at Hōkū. Those outplants that she's managing, those came from the clonal stock, not from the original seed stock.
Okay, thank you for following. Appreciate it. Could we take a break before the next one?
Yep, just one thing, we wanted to, our deputy AG wanted to share something real quick, and then we can take a break if that's okay. Danica, if you're still.
It was just regarding her, what Kavika had asked about, if she had any follow-up.
Okay, she might have stepped away. So we'll go ahead and take a 10-minute break and we'll come back. So 10:39, we'll come back at 10:49 if that's okay with everyone.
Yep, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Aloha, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hōkūala.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
We'll wait for everyone's cameras to come on.
I'm on my phone. I did take my dogs for a walk, but I'm here.
Yeah, 1 or 2 dogs.
Two.
Oh, very nice. Okay, it looks like we just got Melissa. Oh, there she is. Okay, continuing on. Let's 1 second. I'm sorry. Did we know? Is Danica back on?
I don't think she is.
We can circle back. So we're moving on to item 4, which is the status of Kamehameha schools, Keauhou, and Kīlauea Forest Lands Safe Harbor Agreement on Hawaiʻi Island. And we'll start with the DOFAW staff presentation first and move on from there.
Pulling up the presentation now.
Aloha everyone. I have just a very brief update and then I'll let Namaka take over. This is for the Kamehameha schools, the Keauhou and Kīlauea Forest Land Safe Harbor Agreement on Hawaiʻi Island. We are still awaiting, our agency is still awaiting the fiscal year 2024 annual report. We have requested this from the Kamehameha schools team. So unfortunately, I don't have a lot to report on without that annual report. We also, just as a progress update, where we had a conversation with the licensee and US Fish last year and last spring after our annual review to discuss the amendment. So we are waiting on that follow-up draft. Yes, sorry, we are waiting on the licensee to send that amendment draft. And also as a point to add, we would like to do a site visit this year. So we would like to coordinate. We tried to coordinate last year, but our availability was tight. And then I think when Namaka offered dates, we were unable to fulfill those. So we would like to reschedule with Namaka for that as well. So thank you all, and I'll pass it on to Namaka.
Give me just a moment to share my screen. Is that sharing properly? Yeah, okay. Give me just a moment. Okay. Aloha, my name is Namaka Whitehead. I'm a Natural Resources Manager with Kamehameha Schools. And I'm here to share about year 6 of our Keauhou and Kīlauea Safe Harbor Agreement. I apologize for the delay in submission of our annual report, and we will rectify that within the next couple of weeks. But all the information from that report is contained in this presentation. So Kamehameha Schools is an educational trust established by the will of Keli'i Bernice Pauahi Bishop, and our mission is to improve the capability and well-being of people of Hawaiian ancestry. We also steward over 370,000 acres of land inherited from the Kamehameha line of ali'i. And this safe harbor agreement covers 32,000 acres at the Ilikupono of Keauhou in Kapa, Pala, Ka'u. It has a 50-year term and covers 33 rare species. And for those of you that aren't as familiar with Keauhou in the map there, you can see it's bounded by Hawaiʻi Volcanoes National Park, Puʻu Natural Area Reserve, and the Mauna Loa Forest Reserve. It also has a very wide range of elevations and moisture regimes. Let's continue on. So these are the covered species. There's 8 covered wildlife species and 25 covered plant species. Of those covered plant species, only 9 are actually present on the property, those that you see on the top with photos. And 3 of those species are considered special concern species, the Phylostegia rasmosa, Cyanea stectophila, and Bissia menziesii. And the agreement includes additional conservation commitments for those 3 species. I'll now go through some of our covered activities from FY24. For each of these, there's a box on the map that shows what the commitment was that was made in the safe harbor, and then I'll share a little bit about what we did. So in the safe harbor, we committed to plant a minimum of 20,000 seedlings during each 5-year period. We've far surpassed that, planting over 86,000 native seedlings of 45 different species over the first 6 years of the agreement. And you can see the locations on the map in pink. Regarding koa silviculture, we committed to establish a minimum of 1,000 acres of new koa stands. And over the first 6 years of the agreement, we've established 548 acres of new koa stands. We've actually run out of room because the passive restoration has been so successful at Keauhou. So we believe this will be our final year of silviculture. So we're not going to meet that goal of planting 1,000 new acres of koa stands, but with the passive restoration, we're far surpassing that acreage goal. And we will shift in coming years to different restoration strategies, maybe doing more seeding in areas where there aren't as deep soils, planting understory species, and possibly looking into some iliahi silviculture. We committed to manage the property as ungulate-free within fenced units. At the time of the signing of the agreement, we had 30,150 acres that were fenced. We've added a new unit down here a few years ago, bringing the total area managed for zero tolerance to 30,100 acres. All fences are inspected at least semi-annually, and we've been replacing fence that has either deteriorated or is not up to current conservation standards. We've also been dealing with the ingress event for a number of years now. Let me see, pig ingress was first observed in Lower Keauhou, kind of right around this area, in FY20. We immediately started control efforts, and we're not very successful during the first 2 years, despite our best efforts and doing lots and lots of trapping. The population continued to increase. A little over, it's almost 2 years ago, we started doing hunting as well as trapping, and we feel like we're finally getting the population under control. We're ramping up hunting efforts right now. Let me see. We've removed 488 pigs in the last 3.5 years. And there's been a noticeable decline in the pig population. Our vendors think it might even be possible to bring the numbers to maintenance levels by the end of the fiscal year. But we'll see. I'll be happy if we can do it within the next 1.5 years. And we are also considering some additional, actually not considering anymore. We will be installing some internal fencing kind of roughly following the power line here that will divide the Upper Keauhou from Lower Keauhou in the event of future ingress events. And we're considering some additional fencing to make even smaller units in Lower Keauhou in the future. In the agreement, we committed to suppress 4 priority weed species below 10% cover. We far surpassed this, and we manage a huge number of weed species. In FY24, we suppressed almost 1,500 acres of weeds and surveyed almost 5,000 acres for weeds. One notable thing this year is we did find 2 populations of Australian tree fern in the lower ranch. The year prior to this, we had found 1 individual, and so now we are very much on the lookout for more Australian tree fern. We committed to maintain the storage capacity and distribution of water sources, and also to maintain primary access routes, and we've continued to do that, maintaining all of the water sources and access routes that were present at the beginning of the agreement, and we've also added this fire break along the boundary with Hawaiʻi Volcanoes National Park after the large fire event a few years ago. Okay, rapid ohia death. So this map is actually from FY23. I don't have a new map, but ROD was first confirmed in Lower Keauhou in 2017, down here. We observed the first symptomatic trees in Upper Keauhou in 2021. There's still very few symptomatic trees in Upper Keauhou, but there's been a huge dieback in Lower Keauhou. We're hopeful that the fencing and removal of pigs will slow this a bit in Lower Keauhou. But what we found in the last few years is that many of the trees that were dying back were not positive for ROD. And so we did some additional sampling with, that should be U.S. Forest Service, not U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, with some U.S. Forest Service pathologists in 2023, and they got us some results back this year. All 5 of those trees were negative for ROD, for ceratocystis, but they tested positive for other fungal endophytes, and most of these, all of these trees displayed cankers on their stems, kind of like what you see here. The Forest Service is thinking that that all of these fungal endophytes are actually secondary pathogens, and that usually, you know, they will cause the trees to have like reduced vigor, but because we've had some very dry years, that that it actually killed the trees. And so this doesn't really give us like a, you know, I'm not sure what we should do about it, but you know, at least we have some kind of answer here about what's going on, and it sounds like it's not really something that we can do much about, other than to increase restoration efforts in these lower areas, and you know, once we get all the pigs out, to ensure that we maintain those populations at 0 tolerance. We conducted monitoring for forest birds. So now as we move into this monitoring section, I'll show the baseline in these red and yellow boxes at the top, and then what the monitoring commitment was. And if there was a certain entity that committed to do the monitoring, whether it was KS or one of the wildlife agencies, I'll note that as well. So for forest birds, the monitoring consists of canopy assessment every 10 years and species occupancy annually. Of these 7 transects within forest bird stratum 1, the core forest bird habitat. Every 5 years, we also survey an additional, these are 12 transects in Lower Keauhou, but we've been doing this every 3 years instead of every 5 years. So FY24 was one of the years where we did the full survey. We worked with the Three Mountain Alliance and the wildlife agencies to sample 336 stations, and all 4 species were detected. What was really exciting this year, maybe I'll move to the next slide. What was really exciting this year, if you look at like the past 5-6 years of detections, is we observed a lot of endangered forest birds in Lower Keauhou. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, because there are mosquitoes there, but it's really interesting. There were 7 Akepa, 12 Alavi, 7 Akia Polaʻau, and 34 EEV that were detected in Lower Keauhou outside of forest bird stratum 1. Akepa were detected as low as 4,850 feet. Akia Polaʻau as low as 4,330 feet, and Alavi and EEV on the very lowest elevational transect here at 4,200 feet elevation. We're also getting higher numbers of detections within forest bird stratum 1, especially at this, you know, kind of like at this upper corner here. And so what we've done now in FY25 is we've actually expanded our transects. So we've added 95 new stations There are 3 new transects, and then 4 extended transects. And I'm not sure if we'll do these every year, but you know, we're going to see what the data shows, and we might expand them even further to try to capture you know, what's going on. And what we believe is happening is that the habitat is improving and also expanding due to our restoration efforts. For Nēnē, DOFAW conducts an annual survey of breeding pairs. They do surveys 1 day per month from October to March, and most activity is located near the 2 reservoirs on the western side of the property. There was a high of 8 pairs observed in October. It's the highest number of pairs that we've ever observed. And there may have been some pairs observed in earlier years, but DOFAW wasn't like, they weren't taking their data in that way. They were focused more on the total number of Nēnē observed, and starting last year, they started to report specifically on the number of pairs as well. There was also a Nēnē family with 2 goslings that was observed in February below the state Nēnē cabin. DOFAW staff searched for a nest but couldn't find one, and the family wasn't observed physically again, but there was a family with 1 gosling that was observed a few more times on their cameras over the season. And here's a photo of that family. So you see there's the 2 adults here, and then kind of hard to see, but here's the 2 goslings right there. There was 1 additional down wildlife event. There was a male Nēnē carcass found near the Nēnē cabin reservoir, and it was in the vicinity of where the abandoned Nēnē nest was found in February 2023. To my knowledge, there haven't been any additional down wildlife events in the past 6 months. Monitoring for eel consists of canopy assessment every 10 years and species occupancy every 5 years to be conducted by the agencies. We worked with DOFAW and Three Mountain Alliance, as well as the Keauhou Bird Conservation Center, to conduct an occupancy survey in June 2023. And eel were present. There was only 1 eel recorded at a survey station and 1 between stations, but we've also recorded eel in 5 of 6 of our annual forest bird surveys. Similarly, Ope'ape'a monitoring consists of a canopy assessment every 10 years and species occupancy every 5 years to be conducted by the agencies. The agencies didn't have capacity to do this, so we worked with the Three Mountain Alliance to conduct Ope'ape'a monitoring over the course of a year from September 2020, oh, excuse me, this should be September 2023 to August 2024. And they conducted acoustic monitoring at high and low elevation sites. There were 3 meters per site, and you can kind of see the layout of these meters here in the map. The recorders were set out for 7 to 10 days each month, and what this revealed was that Ope'ape'a were present at each site and each location during each sampling period. And we have a lot of data that if someone, I think we provided it to USGS, or we will provide it to USGS, but it was beyond the scope of the project to do anything other than indicate presence or absence. Alala are also included in the agreement, but there's no monitoring because all the released birds were brought back into captivity in 2020. Okay. Endangered plant species. So here's a map showing the baseline that was set prior to the agreement. In 2019, KS worked with PEP. It was 2018 and 2019. Over the first 2 years of the agreement, they conducted a full census of all outplants and wild and founders at Keauhou. And then in 2021, we conducted a supplemental survey to to continue to see if we could find any additional populations or occurrences. And what this is showing up here, these two species with the X's, they're no longer present on the property. The first arrow shows a population, whether there's been an increase or a decrease in the number of populations. And the second arrow shows whether there's been a decrease or an increase in the number of individuals. So the result of both of these surveys are that, again, these two species are no longer present on the property. All the Phylostegia rasposa were actually outplants, and they died prior to the signing of the agreement. But because the species was a special concern species, the agencies required us to include those outplants in the baseline, even though they were dead. The Plantego hawaiiensis was a single founder that we believe also died prior to the signing of the agreement. There's been declining populations of one species, Vicia minzizii, which is also a special concern species it's only found at Keauhou, Puʻu. The decline in populations is largely due to the large wind events that we had a few years ago. They caused extensive damage in the forest, knocking down trees and just really kind of moving the trees around, and it just tore some of the vines to pieces. There's been declining individuals of 4 species, Cyanea stictophila, Vicia minzizii, Clermontia lindsayana, and Cyanea shipmanii. That's been primarily due to the inclusion of a number of very young outplants in the baseline and expected mortality of those outplants. We observed natural regeneration of 2 species, Vicia minzizii and Cyanea shipmanii. And the surveys revealed new populations of Vicia minzizii, Asplenium pruvianum, variety insular, and Clermontia lindsayana, and new individuals as well of Clermontia lindsayana. The surveys also detected 2 additional endangered species that we didn't know were present on the property. Heao, Exocarpus minzizii, and also Senicula sanacensis. And we also revisited another species, Phylostegia macrophylla, that's unlisted but extremely rare. I believe this individual at Keauhou is the only known extant individual. And the last time we visited, it was very healthy. Okay. So some other endangered plant species updates. We did make a number of collections in this past fiscal year. Our focus has been on Vicia minzizii because of its extreme rarity and the concentration of founders here. So in FY24, we took 8 cuttings from 2 founders, and in the first 6 months of FY25, we've taken 24 cuttings from 6 founders and also 11 seeds. I think it was more than 11 seeds. This might be an error, but we collected a number of seeds from 4 founders. This is really exciting because I think in the past we've only had 1 founder that we were able to collect seeds from, and so having seeds now in genetic storage is really, really, really critical. There also have been some problems with mites damaging the propagules in the nursery, and so it makes these seed collections even more important. And then we also collected 6 cuttings and 150 mature fruit from the Phylostegia macrophylla. So for next steps, it's time for us to do a 5-year comprehensive survey of all of the founders and outplants. I need to admit that it's quite daunting to survey this number of rare plants in the kind of intact forest that we have here, but we're gonna attempt it. We will also be doing continued supplemental survey focused on primarily on Plantego hawaiiensis around the vicinity where that one plant died. We'll be doing additional collection with a focus on Vicia and the Phylostegia macrophylla. We're also hoping to finally do some outplanting this year. And then we have an amendment request. So here's a summary of the amendment. It has changed a little bit in the last year. So we're still proposing to decrease the baseline of these 5 species due to outplant mortality in the first 2 years of the agreement. That was something that was allowed for by the Safe Harbor Agreement, but because we didn't, even though we completed our survey during the first 2 years, we didn't physically submit the survey to DOFA. We're unable to use the minor amendment process that was outlined in the Safe Harbor, and instead this will be treated as a regular amendment. Staff in the ESRC have been supportive of this in the past. What's changed is we were previously requesting to include 2 or 3 new covered plant species, and we'd now like to include 11 new covered plant species. 4 of these are or may be present on the property, so the Exocarpus menziesii and Seneclia sanusensis that were found during the supplemental surveys. Also the Phyllostegia macrophylla, which is unlisted, so we may not be able to include it, but we're going to request to see if it's possible. And Phyllostegia ambigua, which also is unlisted, but is very rare on island. There was an outplant of this on site that we believe has died, but we're going to be doing some supplemental surveys to see if we can find any remaining plants. And then these 7 plants aren't present on the property, but the property does contain habitat for them. Some of the habitat is very small, but yeah, we'd still like to include them. Since we're going to do an amendment, we might as well include everything that we might want to conduct restoration and recovery activities for in the future. So next steps, we'll be doing supplemental survey focused on these 4 species to define a baseline. That's the main reason we haven't gotten back to the staff on this amendment yet, is that we need to be able to set that baseline. It's also going to require conversion of the Safe Harbor Agreement to a conservation benefit agreement due to changes in Fish and Wildlife Service regulations. And then it'll require ESRC and BLNR approvals. And oh, sorry. Those are the 2 species that are not listed. And with that, mahalo. Any questions?
Mahalo, Namaka. Just a question. I'm assuming that the collected material is going to the volcano rare plant facility. Is that
yes? All
correct?
the collected material is going to the volcano rare plant facility and to Lion Arboretum. We've been putting some seeds into storage there.
Great. And then wonderful to see the Akepa increase. I had heard about that.
It's been really exciting to see what's going on with the forest birds. Yeah.
Were the Akepa seen or heard? I was just wondering if you happen to know that off the top of your head.
My guess is that they were seen and heard. Sometimes they're seen, sometimes they're heard with the methodology that they use. But I can ask. Oh, and the FY25 surveys were already completed, so I don't have results. I was hoping I might have results, but really exciting to see what that shows.
And I also think it's great that you guys extended your survey routes to try to cover some more of that forest area there. So yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, Namaka, thank you for that. That was really interesting, and was also just curious about the forest birds. I know you're doing the VPC for the counts. Is there any disease sampling that's going on? Just passive misnetting of any of those?
No disease sampling going on, but we are willing to partner with the agencies if there are other actions that they recommend.
Yeah, there's just been some initial, some of the new stuff that's coming out in Amakihi, especially at lower elevations, suggesting there's some disease resistance that might be building up, and it'd be interesting to see if that's spreading onto your property. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Namaka, this is amazing. It's always wonderful to see this this conservation effort and your progress on it. I was just curious, we don't have our Fish and Wildlife Service people with us today. The switch from the Safe Harbor Agreement to Conservation Benefit Agreement, is that I know it feels inappropriate to ask the permittee holder or the Safe Harbor Agreement holder to explain the policy to us, but is that a change in federal policy? Or I don't know if who is best to explain that?
My understanding is that it is a change in federal policy that has been it was proposed proposed a few years ago, and I believe it's been approved. But basically, they are combining safe harbor agreements and candidate conservation agreements into one agreement type that's going to be called the conservation benefit agreement. And so in order for them to make any amendments to the safe harbor, they first have to convert it to that new type of agreement.
Thank you so much. I'm wondering if the AG can advise us on, does that change anything for our committee as far as how we review these things? Is there anything we need to be aware of with that change?
No. So I actually looked at this pretty in depth with the HCP team, or I guess HCP SHA team, when we did oh no, I'm blanking. No, I got it. The orange black damselfly SHA, because that one was kind of funky. It came out, the draft and everything had been under the old federal program, but then the final was under the Conservation Benefit Agreement program. So no, nothing for you guys really to consider for ESRC purposes any differently. Is an interesting wrinkle about their definition of incidental take, which has changed to include purposeful take, but it's basically the same thing as incidental take. But for right now, with all existing documents, nothing needs to really change about your analysis, but something to keep an eye out for when we get new safe harbor agreements that also implicate federal law, because that was something we kind of had to go back and forth on and make the language really clear what was what in that orange black damselfly SHA. Does that answer your question?
I think so. And will new agreements still be called safe harbor agreements, or are they all under this new name?
The state agreements will be called safe harbor agreements, but the federal agreements will be either called the Conservation Benefit Agreement, or there's another longer name too for something else that I forget right now.
Just to keep things confusing. Okay.
Yep.
And
Yep.
does that essentially, I know in many ways our 195D was patterned after the ESA with some differences. Is this the kind of thing where it's just a lag, where it would be in our best interests and to keep confusion down for us to do a policy change on the state side so that the names are the same, or does it matter?
Actually, I don't really see it mattering that much right now, but that's definitely something for DOFA to think about and consider. You know, we would have to do a deeper dive on the federal law. I think it came out summer last year, the federal law. But anyway, so yes, that's definitely something for DOFA to consider. And if that's maybe at the risk of creating more work for myself and DOFA, maybe at a future ESRC meeting, DOFA in consultation with US Fish could do a little mini briefing for you guys on, what the Conservation Benefit Agreement changes were and how that relates to the SHA program under state law.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's just been such a pleasure to see the presentations from NMACA each year on the progress and what's going on with it. And I'd love to see more of these implemented. And if there are things that make it less difficult for applicants to understand the process and all of that, anything that makes it easier for people to set these up.
Definitely.
Is great. So yeah, just trying to keep an eye on that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
And I'd like to jump on the bandwagon of commending Namaka and her team and Kamehameha Schools for doing such an amazing job and being what seems to be the gold standard of monitoring endangered species. I have 3 questions. So Namaka, last year's annual report, I think I recommended that you count the regenerating koa as established koa, and it seems like you made that change this year and we're terming it passive restoration. Did I pick up on that correctly?
Yeah. And I think we'll capture that fully when we do that 10-year habitat assessment. We should be able to capture, what the increase in the different habitat types have been as a result of that passive restoration.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think what you folks do is a lot more than passive restoration. So I would maybe call it something, I would recommend calling it something differently that, I mean, you guys are doing conservation actions that are resulting in regenerating species. I think that's a direct thing myself, but up to you guys, obviously. I just don't think passive gives you folks the credit that you deserve for this work. Anyway, and then for the pigs part, you mentioned something about maintenance levels of a population. Could you clarify what you mean by that? Especially in terms of Rod, when we know that the presence of pigs is correlated with the spread of a disease.
That's what our vendor has called it. I'm thinking it's something that's slightly higher than near zero, that it's a very low number of pigs that we're able to, to keep under control, but our goal is near zero. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think we'll get there. It's just we're still not quite there yet, but for us, it's very exciting that we're even at this point where we're that close to near zero again. It's been difficult with the pigs over the last few years.
Awesome. Yeah, certainly an impressive amount of pigs that you guys have been removing. And then
sorry, I got one other thing. Sorry, Kubika.
Yeah, go for it.
And I don't have the video today, but our vendor actually set up some game cameras along some of the fences and actually got video of piglets squeezing through some of the wire, which we knew was happening. We suspected that was the problem the whole time, but now we actually have video of it happening. So I think they're going to be sharing that more broadly in the conservation community. But a huge part of our efforts has been replacing that fence or retrofitting it using different wire. I think we might even be stringing some barbless wire along the bottoms of the fences to minimize the possibility of that occurring in the future.
Oh, that's major. So is that standard hog wire fence that they're squeezing through?
Sorry, I don't remember the numbers of the fences, but it's the kind of fence. I think conservation standards have maybe changed a bit over time, but there's certain fences that have like the conservation standard now use like graduated wire where the holes are smaller at the bottom and they get bigger as you go up. Some of this fence that was used, it has like the same size holes all the way up the fence, and it just doesn't work for piglets. I'm not sure why we didn't have this problem before, because we maintained the property at zero tolerance for quite a few years before this ingress occurred. So I'm thinking there must have been something else that was pushing the pigs in this direction. But yeah, regardless, our intention is to have conservation standard fences that can hold up to whatever kind of pressure comes at us in the future.
Awesome, thank you. And then my last question was, KS obviously has a lot of land all over the place with endangered species, and I was trying to think what was the trigger for this one entering into SHA to begin with, and was it the plans for silviculture on the property?
It was a variety of things. It was definitely the koa silviculture, the desire to be able to harvest the koa that we're planting in the future should, future generations of managers, desire to do that. But it's also that there's such a high concentration of endangered species on the property and a lot of like multi-use activities. We have a lot of education that happens there. We have cultural activities and there's just a lot going on there. And so we wanted to ensure that, the positive actions that we were doing, that were increasing the populations of endangered species, were not going to, curtail, these other activities that we were doing.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that in my mind. So I would certainly look forward to a field trip there for the ESRC, and hopefully I can make it when it comes out. Thank you.
Mahalo. Yeah, we're happy to have the ESRC and the staff come anytime. Let us know. And I'll work with the staff to try to set up a date for them. Yeah.
Thank you, Namaka. I wanted to say I didn't say this for my presentation, but it's amazing work, and I'm really excited to see what y'all presented for this past fiscal year. Y'all are doing so much, so we really appreciate it.
Do we want to bring up the recommendations?
Sure.
Right
So
now,
I would just, reiterate my recommendation to find a more becoming word to, other than passive restoration, for the amount of habitat they are, that's increasing due to their direct management. I don't have any suggestions right now, but I think passive doesn't reflect the amount of action they take.
We can look into that.
Does anyone else on the committee have any other recommendations that we need to highlight here? Okay.
Sorry, sorry, Namaka, in light of the forest birds expanding potentially, is your team exploring at all collaborating on any mosquito control efforts? Since you said there are mosquitoes at the site.
We are not, but we are open to that if folks want to work with us on mosquito control efforts. But I know that they're very expensive and that they've been focused elsewhere for important reasons. So yeah, we're willing to partner with folks on that if anyone wants to, but we probably won't pursue it independently at this time.
Yeah, no, the expense of that I would expect is not something that a private landowner could take on, but collaborating to provide space and access, I guess, is the kind of thing that I would more expect from a private landowner. Yeah, if you're creating this amazing habitat that's attracting them down into areas where they might be exposed, and if the disease sampling shows that they are getting exposed, yeah, it'd be great. I know that efforts are hampered right now due to kind of funding freezes and stuff like that, but yeah, thank you again.
Mahalo.
Yeah, even though we have some of those funding freezes currently, we are still pushing forward and having effort towards mosquito control and monitoring on Hawaii Island with general funds right now. And so East Hawaii is working on some projects and kind of get a understanding of where they're doing their sampling and stuff. I'm not sure. I'd have to talk with them, but yeah, work is still ongoing, even though we still have that freeze. But
I could just chime in here, Jason. This is Danica again. Yesterday, that preliminary injunction that was granted should cover those grants, the Birds Not Mosquitoes grants. So those should be freed up. And if they are not, have someone reach out to me. Thanks.
oh, that's amazing news. I did not hear anything of that. I didn't hear any of that information yet. So thanks for sharing.
Yeah, definitely. So all grants in Hawaii should be freed up. So I'll send an email. I should probably circulate something to chair and everything, but just so everyone's aware on this call, Hawaii grants from the Fed government should be unfrozen.
BIL grants unfrozen.
And the
IRA
ones as well.
Wow, that's
So
excellent.
yay.
Wow. That just made my day, literally. Okay. Anything else for recommendations? Okay, we'll get a show of hands for pushing this one forward. Thank you, Melissa. Lisa, Lindsay. All right, great. We will approve this and push this forward. I'm gonna just check and see if there's any comments on Zoom.
Testifiers, or they're not supposed to be called ones.
Well, testifiers, yeah, on Zoom. No comments or testifiers on Zoom.
No comments on the YouTube.
No, nothing on YouTube and HCP email, nothing. Oh, great.
I have a quick question for Namaka that doesn't have to do with this, has to do with the previous one, if that's okay.
Go for it.
Namaka, I don't know if you were on earlier, but we're talking about translocations of Hōkūala. And there were some concerns about translocating to properties that aren't managed, especially in regards to predator control. Just so we have it in our minds, are there any KS lands with wetlands that are managed for predators that we should be aware about, where we might want to translocate waterbirds to?
On Maui, Molokaʻi, and Hawaiʻi Island, right?
Anywhere really. I'm just curious to. There's a working group, and I don't know if KS is involved in that, but they might only be looking at state managed lands or federal lands and not privately held lands.
Yeah, we're not. I don't think we're engaged in that working group. We have various wetlands that are in different states of management. Mostly places where we're doing predator control, but we don't have like predator-proof fencing or anything like that to fully exclude predators. Our focus has been on Makalawena in Kona, Punalu'u, and Uko'a.
Wait, which Punalu'u?
Punalu'u, Ahu.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
and there are alai'ula at Punalu'u and at Uko'a. And where else? I think we've recently started some monitoring efforts on Kauaʻi at Molokaʻi. And we're hoping to do predator control there in the future. We're just starting to do wetland management, but I think it's something that we hope we can do more of in the future. We also have a number of wetlands in Molokaʻi that we're not doing predator management at yet, but might in the future.
Okay, thank you so much for that. So it sounds like there might be a willingness to participate in that working group. So HCP staff, if you could communicate to those folks that we have a willing landowner that could add a lot to the conversation.
And I think it's Helen Rain maybe coordinating those conversations.
Yeah, that might be possible.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And maybe one other thing that might be of interest to the committee is, we are curious. So at Punalu'u, we actually created some new wetland habitat, and we're kind of curious if it might be possible to do some kind of conservation mitigation banking there. I know there's a new state law that allows for beginning to engage in conservation banking. Anyway, just a heads up that it might be something that you guys might see from us in the future. We might reach out to the HCP staff to discuss that. We have really good data on the increase in water birds that's happened since we've created that habitat. And, we'd like to take additional actions to continue to increase and improve those habitats.
Thank you for that, Namaka. Yeah, appreciate that.
Namaka, that's super exciting. This is in line with some conversations we had yesterday, as far as it can be really difficult at the state managed sites to demonstrate that mitigation funds from an HCP are providing an actual increase directly tied to those HCP funds. And certainly restored lo'i and indigenous managed wetlands, I think, really offer the opportunity to demonstrate that you're increasing off of a number that just wouldn't be there without that management taking place. So combining that with the conservation banking opportunities is super aligned, I think, with where we've been thinking there's a lot of potential. So very exciting. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, our challenge is that we've already made most of those improvements, and I don't know if we can count things that we already did, but we're gonna explore that. Yeah, mahalo.
Great, thank you, Namaka. We will move forward to item 5, if that's okay with everyone. Item 5 is the Maui Nui centric. We have Haleakalā. Well, let me start here. Yeah, it looks like we have staff will present on the status of 3 safe harbor agreements on Haleakalā Ranch, Pu'u, Hōkū, and the Programmatic Nēnē safe harbor agreements.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So we're starting off with Haleakalā Ranch Safe Harbor Agreement. This is This was previously managed by DOFA, and in 2023, January 2023, it was turned over to Kamehameha Wind Power 1 and 2. And they have Tetra Tech as their consultant working on the ground to carry out the management actions. But DOFA does continue regular monitoring at the site as well. So these numbers are reported from, I think, in conjunction with DOFA and KWP. So the actions that are carried out include mowing, weed control, fence maintenance, water maintenance, predator control, trapping, and road maintenance. And like I mentioned, DOFA conducts monthly Nēnē monitoring surveys and tracks the nesting success as well as performs banding. So in fiscal year 2024, there were 25 banded adult birds observed, and an additional 6 unbanded adults were also observed. 9 nests were documented, 4 were abandoned, but 5 were successful. And out of these nests, 13 eggs hatched, and there were 6 fledglings that were also banded. In total, there was 14 individuals banded at the site. There was also 8 adults banded in addition to the fledglings. Per the predator control methods, they had an estimated 20 mongoose and 2 rats removed. Unfortunately, there were 5 goslings predated and 2 goslings that died of natural causes. Let me see if I have anything else to report. So as of fiscal year 2025, this would have been this past Nēnē season, they had 2 goslings that have fledged so far. So starting off this nesting season, there's already been 2 fledglings that had, 2 goslings that have fledged successfully. So, and then there's more nests identified already at this point. Let's just double check for this graph. It just indicates the numbers that have been released. So there was a translocation that brought over birds to Haleakalā back in, I think it was back in 2018. Anyway, the translocation occurred of 56 birds. And so this map just shows the number released over time, and it hasn't increased since that initial translocation for the ones that have been brought over. This demonstrates the number of fledged, nests depredated, any deaths, and the number of predators killed. So it's kind of hard to read when it's all squished in there, but we provide this for the legislative report, so I wanted to share it with you all. It's really tiny though. So we can move on to the next one, or we can have questions now. I'm open to either.
If we have questions now, we can vet questions now if anybody has any.
And John Medeiros is trying to get into the Zoom. Jason, actually, could you send him the Zoom link again? To answer any other questions, since DOFA Maui also does on the ground monitoring.
Are we hearing a presentation from the folks who are managing the site after this?
So we're not, just because this was previously, I mean, I guess the SHA is for Haleakalā Ranch. So in the past, because DOFA has done the work and then KWP has done the work, we've just presented on behalf of them. It really overlaps the mitigation that KWP 1 and 2 are doing at Haleakalā Ranch. So what Molly presented yesterday is in fact, it's just the same activities and actions.
Can I ask, use a call a friend to an AG question? It seems really complicated to have a safe harbor agreement and an HCP combined. What do we as a committee need to be looking out for as far as like potential conflicts of interest or that type of a thing? Is Danica on?
Let me see if Danica is still on. I know in the past, we concerned about potential, I'm trying to think, like if they, just making sure we're tracking the credits. And with the HCP on that site and the fact that they can't have take, that could be a problem. But I think that, I think that would be more risk liability to perhaps KWP. And there's provisions in which they can have like, I mean, hopefully they're not having any take, but like a research, I don't know if it was a research permit. We discussed about this at Puʻu Hōkū, in case there was any take to absolve the ranch of that responsibility, because I guess the ranch is the SHA, but then they have the wind farm mitigating, so it does get a little complicated, but I actually would probably rely on Danica to clarify that. So let me see if she is on.
If she can just clarify what the responsibilities are of the landowner that we're supposed to be focusing on for this portion of the day. I have a decent number of concerns about whether this is actually performing its function as mitigation for the HCP, but that's a separate conversation, right? That should have taken place yesterday. Today, it's about whether the landowner is doing their due diligence aligned with the SHA, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, I gotta like divide those
So
things in.
in the future, so I followed the format of kind of past what we did in the past, and we presented on behalf, but that's like a good recommendation. And I believe Jason brought this up to me too, is like maybe we could have Haleakalā Ranch present, because it would make sense to make sure that they, even if they have KWP carrying out the work, that they present that the updates that it shows that they are maintaining within the bounds of the safe harbor agreement. But we do have an MOU with Haleakalā Ranch between DOFA, Haleakalā, and KWP that kind of outlines the various responsibilities. So I don't know if that helps alleviate any concerns, but I think Danica's logging back in.
Okay, yeah, I just need, well, and Danica, it looked like she was on. I think I just need guidance as far as like, what are we supposed to be evaluating here? And yeah, from the safe harbor agreement perspective, who's responsible for what?
And ultimately, I think, you know, it is, like you said, the landowner's responsibility. But I think because it is a little confusing because KWP is doing mitigation on the land. So that's why we kind of outline in the MOU all the various expectations and roles. But yes, Danica said she stepped out, so we might have to wait till she logs back in.
So maybe as a request, an actual request to the staff for next year, when this particular HCP/SHA is presented to us, if there can be a nice little table that can be prepared, that's like lays out a summary of what you guys have in the MOU as far as who's responsible for what. And from our perspective, what are we supposed to be evaluating on the SHA side versus the HCP side? Like, what are we supposed to be looking for accountability? That would be super helpful.
Thank you, Melissa. I'm writing that right now. Can you pull up the recommendations? And I believe John Medeiros is on now. Do you see him, Jason?
Yeah.
If there's any specific questions, but DOFA is really just going there monthly to do the monitoring and nest checks and banding. So don't want to put John on the spot. But
sorry, everyone, I stepped away for a second. What was the question?
it was a bigger discussion. Melissa presented like concerns around the Haleakalā Ranch SHA because there's mitigation also happening on the site. And then because, you know, we're presenting on behalf of the SHA and we don't have the ranch, the private landowner here. And I did let Melissa know we have an MOU that outlines the responsibilities of every party. But Melissa suggested that in the future, we really clearly present on the responsibilities and roles for each party regarding this mitigation and SHA and then DOFA's monitoring.
Less of a concern and more of like a, hey, what's our job here? Just a point of clarification. What are we supposed to be doing as an ESRC committee?
Yes,
today?
definitely. And I understand or appreciate the comment because when we were looking at doing, or when the permittee was looking at doing mitigation at Haleakalā Ranch, that was also a concern I had of, you know, how are we going to monitor like the ITL take that the SHA gets when there's mitigation going on and we don't want to mess up the mitigation numbers. But in the documents, the HCP SHA team worked really hard to make sure everything was really clear and delineated. But yes, I agree and second that, presentations, it would be helpful to you guys, but if you guys are just reviewing the SHA right now, that's the role you're in. So evaluating the SHA criteria and stuff. You don't necessarily have to think about the mitigation from the other activities to the best that you can.
So in a case where we're seeing, I don't know if you can put those numbers back up, HCP staff, sorry, thank you so much. But in a case where we're seeing, if I'm remembering right, pretty poor numbers on this, if my memory is serving, I don't know if you can put that back up, but is that a responsibility of the SHA? Is that a problem on the SHA, or is that something where the HCP mitigation isn't working?
Can DOFA put that slide back up that Melissa's referring to?
Yes, just a moment.
Okay.
I guess this was my only slide I presented. I don't know if I have it in the slide, but.
So I don't know, let's see here, Lindsay, someone who's been on an island where there's lots of Nēnē and kind of knows Nēnē numbers. If you see 6 chicks fledged from starting 9 nests, those numbers don't look good to me. Is that problematic? Is that something that worries you?
I think it's tough to say on an island that has mongoose because the scale for this is going to be different than on Kauaʻi. I was actually going to ask questions because I'm not as familiar with this project. So the releases were stopped in, looks like 2016. Is that correct?
I'm gonna double check on that, Lindsay. Why?
Okay, but like some time ago, 5+ years ago, is that right?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And it looks like fledging has just been, the number has been relatively low since then, but it's hard to know what the baseline population was. That's where the reference of how many birds are producing how many chicks is helpful, and you have that over on the right. It's just hard to follow the trend because the trend looks like these guys are blinking out, and it would be helpful to know what's causing that.
I see. Yeah, so in the context of Melissa's question, I agree for your guys' purposes, it is a bit difficult to tell whether or not the SHA is being successful or the HCP mitigation is being successful. My take is that would be on the Haleakalā Ranch and the permittee and licensee to, be able to articulate that information to you guys. On where the baseline was before mitigation on behalf of the HCP was when it started and how things have changed since that mitigation has started. My understanding is that the mitigation for the HCP, correct me if I'm wrong, DOFA, but so far the mitigation has consisted of back funding efforts that have occurred there over the past few years, and that they haven't actually started, or if they did start, they're only just now starting actual on the ground. No, okay, Kinsley's shaking her head, never mind.
They've been managing, supporting management for years now, and I just, to circle back, the baseline was 0. I don't know, sorry to jump in there, but they have been doing actions, and then that was just to cover shortages. So that payment that they recently was just shortages, but they had been doing management actions previously.
Okay.
Does that clarify, Danica? Sorry, I don't know if that's what you're referring to.
Yes, but I guess I'm just acknowledging the tough task that ESRC has right now, and I think we kind of discussed this when we were contemplating the mitigation at an SHA site. So yes, is my answer. It's confusing and hard.
Okay, so 2 requests. One, I feel like this is kind of a mess each year when we see it. And we're not able to do a very good job of this. So this is one of those things that I would love to see something, 6 months from now on what's being done to fix this. Like, if we just see it again a year from now, we're like, what was this? Wait, I remember this being a mess, and has anything happened? Like, it'd be nice to have at least an update from staff in 6 months' time on what's being done to fix this. 2, please don't present the data this way. That graph is a mess. To have the predators on the same graph as the releases, and then everything else that I would expect to see as far as like chicks, eggs, whatever, like, and adults. It's a really, I don't put that in graph form. Put it in a table, and it should be a couple of different tables. So the way it was laid out on the Kauaʻi one was much more straightforward, as far as we're used to seeing, like number of nests, number of eggs laid, number of eggs hatched, number of chicks fledged. And that would be on a table, and then the releases and number of adults persisting. There's got to be another way to show that, but and predators would be just stated as number of predators removed. And as a general take home, I'm much less interested in how many predators are removed, and I'm much more interested in how many predators remain. And so I realize that that's a harder number to do, and everyone always just reports on the number they trapped, and it sounds very impressive. But what matters is the number of predators that are still impacting the site. So if you started off with 500 and you removed 300, you still have 200 at the site, right? So it's more about what's the impact that you're still seeing. And when you have those kind of numbers of like 6 chicks fledged off of 9 nests, it suggests that there's a problem with predators that I think is kind of hiding in the midst of that graph. So yeah, maybe just if to make everyone's job easier next year, a table that outlines clearly what you need from us on this, and separates out what we're evaluating on the HCP side versus what we're evaluating on the Safe Harbor Agreement side. And then if the data can be presented in a more clear format so that we can better evaluate what's going on, those 2 things would make it helpful. But generally speaking, I'm seeing a lot of red flags at this site.
And just to go back, so the total of 53 birds were translocated to Haleakalā Ranch between 2011 and 2016. And then there were, I misspoke, there were an additional 3 birds that were translocated in fiscal year 2023. So, but I think that, so they are banding up at the ranch. So I think in terms of like resighting and maybe where these birds are going, yeah, it would be good. I can try to summarize this better next year. I appreciate the feedback. Kind of just followed what we did in the past, but this makes a lot of sense. And I think it is tricky to iron out the details between the mitigation and the SHA responsibilities. So, but they, as an SHA, they're just, continuing their ranch activities that they do. And I could go over those covered activities, but basically then Nēnē is the only covered species for their SHA. So it has been brought up past baseline, which is something I think we started.
The other thing to remember about this project is DOFAW, both the branch and admin, has had a huge hand in the reason this exists. So it's not just the landowner was generous and willing to be involved in an agreement like this for DOFAW to release problem birds that were causing challenges in other places. So I think there's 3 parties to consider here, not just the landowner and the wind, but also DOFAW, as I understand it, historically was the one that had to implement these actions. So it's not just Haleakalā and the wind, it's DOFAW as well. And I think in the past, I recall the staff at admin HCP were presenting on behalf of the branch, but didn't have a lot of the information that the branch. So I appreciate that branch staff is here, to maybe help clarify and give some more history on this project.
Yeah, John, if you have any information you'd like to share with the group, you can at this time. Otherwise, we'll continue forward with making sure that this information is displayed more accurately. Yeah, we're gonna move forward with reviewing our recommendations here and approving recommendations as we finish typing here. If there's anything else you guys want on here, please share now. I've had some of the same questions with this, and so. Okay, ESRC, have you guys all had a chance to review the recommendations here for Haleakalā Ranch? And if so, we can just get a show of hands.
Oh, sorry. I think a lot of this was actually a request for the HCP staff. This is not going to the safe harbor agreement landowner, right? This is more.
It is more for HCP staff to see prevent collecting data continued.
I think we just put it there since it's related
Yeah.
to the SHA, but we could reword it to be.
Yeah, because I would never want to see this sent to a landowner and they're like, "What? This isn't my job. Why am I being expected to do this?" Right? So again, for record keeping, we need to be really clear. So
Thank you, Melissa.
we know what we're asking for.
Yeah.
Yep, I'm in support.
Sorry to interrupt. I was in a phone call. I want to add something about, and I agree with Melissa about, I kind of saw that chart and it is kind of confusing. I recommend also with that the chart should have just the nests, eggs, chicks, and success of the chicks, and then all the way to fledging. So, I mean, I don't think we can make a chart separately where you have predator control or whatever, what is removed from the area. We don't know how many predators are in the area. I know they have cameras now out, so I don't know, maybe they can get more data that way. But yeah, I agree 100% on that. I don't know if I missed anything else. I apologize. I was on a phone conversation.
No problem. And can you clarify just, is it a pen that they're nesting in that's supposed to be like a predator-free pen?
Yeah, it is supposedly it's we call it an open top release pen.
Right.
And it is hardware mesh around the whole pen, about 4 feet high. And then but on the edge of the hardware fence is an electrified fence. So if a predator climbs up to the fence, they're going to supposedly get zapped. One of the problems we do have with that type of design is cattle have a tendency to lean on the fence, so they ground it out, and then it's a constant maintenance of the fence, which we're redesigning that on Molokaʻi when we're doing the new pen currently.
Okay, thank you. So like in theory, it would be mongoose free inside the pen, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and the hardware cloth is also buried in the ground, about 1 foot in the ground. So if something digs into the ground, they should hit that wire or any kind of digging. There's an indication that there's a predator around there. A trap line. We ran trap lines prior to the releases in the pen and continue to, just in case there's a breach in the pen, there's still trap line in the pen, but also in the perimeter around the pen is traps.
Yeah, we were just trying to kind of understand the low fledgling numbers, given that this was taking place inside of a pen. 6 fledglings out of 9 nests seemed kind of low, given that it's inside a predator-free pen. So
yeah, I mean, some things to consider, and I mean, doing all these open top release pens, and I mean, we don't have any indication, but there's also always a possibility that you can have a cattle egret stealing the goslings, and if there's cattle there, if there's cattle around the area, there's cattle egrets.
Yeah.
And then we kind of, as a possibility.
Yeah, Poyo, Barnell's.
Barnell, yeah, correct.
Both can take them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
John, do you ever see territorial interactions between the Nēnē pairs within the pen? Like, how large is this with the number of pairs that are breeding in there?
It depends how big the population is in the pen. On Molokaʻi, I've seen a family of 4 end up with a family of 12. They basically adopted the goslings from the other families because aggression was the male was pretty aggressive with the rest of the males.
Okay.
Yeah, we're done with this. Thanks, John.
Yep.
Appreciate your time.
Can you stay on, Rob?
Yeah, I will.
Okay, thanks, John.
Okay. So this item actually had multiple sites. So we'll move on to the Molokaʻi site, Puʻu Hōkū, and present on that. Do we have the same type of?
We do. We can erase the graph. Why don't we just do that so we don't have to? We'll just focus on the text. Oh, you have the downloaded version. Okay. Anyway, okay. So for the Puʻu Hōkū Ranch Safe Harbor Agreement, fiscal year 2024, 4 adult individuals were regularly observed, and the population estimate for Molokaʻi was 4 when I made this presentation, but as I updated yesterday for the island count, it's up to 6. As John excitedly shared that 2 goslings have fledged and they've been banded. So it says, no banding occurred in fiscal year 2024, but there were banding most recently in fiscal year 2025. And in terms of cats, there was DOFA removed 1 cat and 34 mongoose, and the ranch removed 5 cats and 10 mongoose. This property has new management, and so they are actively doing predator control. They are not allowing any cats on the facility anymore, and any cats will be trapped and removed. And so that's really exciting. The maintenance at the site included monthly checks. And so they had this open top release pen, but most recently in December, or I believe maybe November, they started taking it down and rebuilding it. But typically the maintenance and management actions include monthly checks and patch repairs, regular mowing and weed control for habitat maintenance, and weekly checks of water lines and water troughs. In fiscal year 2024, the ranch personnel mowed an additional 10-yard perimeter around the pen to kind of keep that clean and mowed, and so that there's no predators that could be hiding in those areas, and a 1/2 acre of alien vegetation was removed. In terms of, I'm going to touch on this a little bit more, but this they're actively being involved in the translocation of Nēnē, which is occurring in the first week of April. And so the ranch has been an excellent partner in this with DOFA and US Fish working the translocation team. And so, as Molly mentioned yesterday, four families will be translocated, and KWP is another one where I guess it's going to be tricky because KWP will be doing their mitigation there, and they will take over management in terms of managing for production for their HCP. But it seems like we have a really great relationship now that's building with the new management team at Puʻu Hōkū. And we had a meeting with them in person in December, I believe, with DOFA Maui Nui, as well as the ranch and US Fish translocation team. So we feel confident that they're moving on the right track to properly manage the site and keep it more predator free. And with this new Nēnē pin that John was speaking to, yeah, we're excited about that integrity of the new fence and having a hood to prevent any cats from getting in as well. So I don't know if John wants to add anything there, any other updates, but there's already been goslings that have also been banded and fledged at this site as well.
Yeah, a little thing extra to add on to that. The family, which the two goslings started fledging, we got a a cellular pack on the mail, so we can now track that family, which when we do our new translocation, we're going to also do that for individuals so we can monitor the families as well.
Awesome. Thank you, John. And just to go back in terms of baseline condition, at the time of the SHA, there was no wild Nēnē on Molokaʻi, so the baseline condition was 0 on the property. And the SHA was intended to allow for reintroduction of Nēnē on the property and construction of the release pen and provision of habitat for Nēnē grazing and breeding. So similar, I should have said this for Haleakalā, but I appreciate Lisa saying this, is that there was translocation that happened at both of these sites. For Haleakalā, it was regarding, like Lisa mentioned, moving birds from Kauaʻi to Haleakalā. And this one, we want to bring birds to enhance the population on Molokaʻi. So back in 2002, it was 14 birds were translocated, and it went on till 2005. There was a series of different translocations that occurred. So just to kind of touch on those points, that might be helpful.
Okay.
Were you muted the whole time? Okay.
You add.
Oh, and we'll pull up our recommendation slide now for Puʻu Hōkū Ranch.
I think they're doing one all together for this or something.
Oh no, I'll do a new one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think for me, it's just a copy paste.
Okay. Great, thank you, Kingsley. I don't think we need to. I guess we can approve this. It's a rubber stamp. If everyone's okay with the recommendations that we have here for DOFA staff, we can go ahead and show hands if that's okay.
Sorry, the one maybe that's not a copy paste, the 6-month update. This one just from a brief look, was maybe not quite as concerning as the other one, but I don't know if other people have opinions on that. As far as the committee, would you want an update on this one as well as the other one? Just as a question for the rest of the committee.
I mean, I think we're gonna continue to see a growth in private landowner sites under safe harbor agreements, serving mitigation sites for some of the the offsets of the take from the HCPs. So I think, I don't know about a 6-month update, but I think this issue is going to continue to surface and probably grow in the future. And I think, like I said, also recognizing DOFA's desire to do conservation actions across the state. So I think providing clarity and safety for private landowners being involved in these kinds of relationships and smoothing that out so it is clear and not convoluted and confusing.
Okay, so Lisa, just to interpret that for the sake of what needs to be written here, in that case, you would support what's written here, the 6-month update to the ESRC, as far as how they're balancing SHA obligations versus HCP mitigation obligations, not necessarily as it relates specifically to this location, but more broadly.
Yeah, it's a broad recommendation beyond, not necessarily related specifically to this SHA. So I'm fine removing that bullet point.
We can put that in the general recommendations. Thank you, Lisa. We have no comments on this one.
Pull up it's really small. Can they see it?
I can see, yeah, we can see the general recommendations. It's small, but it's growing list.
PowerPoint.
There you go.
The causes.
You're going off the page.
Yeah, might not be. Okay.
Can you guys all see the general recommendations? Okay.
Which number 8?
Yeah, just number 8.
I think the one thing on number 6, you might just want to clarify in privately managed wetlands or something like that at the end of the sentence on number 6. Otherwise, the sentence, yeah, doesn't quite make sense. Thanks.
We're gonna acquire more land, Melissa, that hasn't been managed before. And no, I'm just kidding.
Programmatic.
Yeah, we have one more. Do we have any comments from anyone? But we can go through the rest of these and then go to comments online.
Well, sorry, I have one more in relation to that one. For waterbirds, I think I mentioned maybe reaching out to state parks to see if they have any predator control programs in their parks, in areas, the parks that also have waterbirds. So is like Hyannis State Park, Ha'ia State Park, and others. But it would be nice to know if could be a way that we could have these two divisions coordinating for waterbird recovery, endangered waterbird recovery. Does that make sense to the staff? Okay, thank you.
Mhm. I think we're gonna push forward to the programmatic Nēnē safe harbor agreements. Who's presenting for that? Mason?
Just one brief slide. And it's just touching on what we've already discussed. So this is the programmatic Nēnē safe harbor agreement that exists for the island of Molokaʻi. And DOFA is continuing to reach out to landowners to participate in this programmatic safe harbor. But with this new translocation of a cohort of the Kauaʻi Nēnē to Molokaʻi at the ranch that's going to occur, that could provide more traction to landowners for other landowners to participate in this programmatic safe harbor agreement. So hopefully that outreach efforts can, it's basically going to expand with this translocation a little bit. So I don't know if John wants to touch on this, but there could be potential for individuals to join because we don't have any other individuals for the programmatic safe harbor agreement. But maybe John can provide some details from Maui Nui on this. Maybe we lost him. But there's not much traction or activity around this one right now. I think as a staff team. Oh, John's here. Okay.
In regards to that, we reached out in the past to people on Molokaʻi. We continue to reach out to them. We are looking at these. We're almost finished with a handout flyer that we'll be giving out to the public as well. And hopefully we can get some landowners interested, some other ranches as well. So we'll be looking forward to doing that and moving forward with that.
Thank you, John. I just was going to add, as an HCP staff, it is challenging to find time to kind of work on these developing, you know, and especially programmatic ones because they can have a lot of licensees. But as Jason said, we're hopefully expanding our HCP team in the future. So I think that would be really important is to have an HCP staff really working hard on these programmatic and like developing kind of ones that we want to grow and increase for the safe harbors or HCPs overall for like, we've talked about, you know, the programmatic Nēnē HCP for the whole state. So there's definitely things that are in the works if we have more time.
Do we want to look at?
Do you want to do the recommend if there's any
Yeah,
recommendations?
let's just see if there's any recommendations for this.
There's not really. Does the ESRC have any recommendations or wish list for the programmatic Nēnē SHA?
I don't have any at this time.
Yep, I'm hearing none. Do we need to look at the general recommendations and approve that where we're at right now, the overall?
Yes,
Okay.
so that was the last part of item 5. So do you want to circle back? And I believe we still have Danica. Kavika had that outstanding question as well.
Oh. Kavika, you had an outstanding question. Do you remember what it was?
It's been so long.
Okay.
From today or yesterday?
I think it was from today. I think we
was-
addressed everything yesterday when we.
The 195
Oh, yeah,
D-4 G.
Oh, I thought you answered that.
Well,
or
I
no?
think she was gonna look into it, and then we lost Danica a couple times for the break. But I think overall, she said it was basically the extent of what we have on the slide right now. Just that it's specific related to plants.
Yeah, just plants.
Well, this slide is blank. Which slide are you talking about?
Oh,
We'll bring it up.
can you
here.
bring up the non-wind, sorry, general recommendations?
Yeah, so while they're pulling that up, this is Danica again. Yeah, I looked through 195D and it looks like the only reference to the genetic diversity is in plants. So which makes sense because usually the program or the like HCP would be for like a few plants. So that makes more sense that that requirement would be for HCPs for plants, whereas animal genetics, it's a little harder to control unless they're in captivity, the genetics component. And if they're in captivity, I trust that the scientists are doing what they should be doing to ensure genetic diversity in the populations.
Yeah, and so the reason I asked to look at the legislative record on this is because I think there was some discussion back and forth that might give some context.
Okay, I can look into that and then shoot you an email with anything I find separately. Does that work? Or do you want the whole ESRC?
I think, yeah, certainly other members would be interested in the answer.
Okay.
That doesn't break any laws.
No, I can send it all to you separately. It just wouldn't be a group discussion. But
Okay.
it's gonna take me longer to track down.
Understood, but appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Addressing the administrative rules, yeah. We can also, as we develop our administrative rules, make sure that we have some sort of language referencing this, and of course all that will go in front of you guys as we're making rules so you can see what we're talking about. Sometimes there's a statute with nothing to follow, and that's one of the administrative rules.
And Jason, I think when you're doing that review, the reason why the genetics does matter, like for example, it's not inconceivable that bats could disappear from Oahu given the amount of take that's already been approved. That's a genetically unique segment of the statewide population. And so, and yet it appears there maybe isn't anything specifically written to address that particular issue of the genetic loss of an entire island population. So that's the kind of discussion that I think we're asking for is on one hand, what's written in the law. On the other hand, do we need to have a conversation about whether the law is matching the needs of what we need to do, right?
Yep, understood. Okay, well, I think we can go ahead and just show of hands for approval of these general recommendations for non-wind. And we'll move on to our next item. Thanks, Kavika. Thanks, Melissa. And Lindsay, thank you.
And
okay,
Lisa.
and Lisa. Mahalo, guys. Okay. Do we have any comments anywhere else in the public?
Not on Zoom.
Not on Zoom, not on YouTube, not on email.
Okay, no, sorry.
Nothing on email. Okay.
I just, before you adjourn, just wanted to say thank you. Again, Danica might still be on. We really appreciate Danica. I think you missed our shout out in the morning, but grateful for all your efforts and help as our amazing AG for DLNR. So
yes, thank you, Danica, and motion to adjourn.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Go ahead.
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that's unanimous.
Thank you, ESRC, for all your time and
Thank
effort.
you so much, staff. Appreciate it.
Mahalo.
12:29, Randy.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, committee. Oh, so on.